Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The world waits anxiously for Trump's impending tariffs as businesses, consumers and investors prepare for an all-out trade war. Israel issues evacuation warnings for Rafah, vowing to return to combat in great force after the bodies of emergency workers are discovered. And China launches military drills around Taiwan as a warning against Taiwanese independence. Now to our top story, and US President Donald Trump will take historic action tomorrow to improve American competitiveness as he prepares to impose his global tariff promises. Speaking at the White House in just the last hour, the press secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters President Trump was with trade and tariff teams right now and was focusing on making American manufacturing a superpower. Here's what she had to say.
Well, the ultimate change for these companies in these countries, Mark, will happen when they decide to do business in the United States of America. And as I just laid out, they will face no tariffs at all if these companies choose to invest here in the United States and to move their production and their manufacturing here to the United States as well. As for tomorrow, the president will be addressing the decades of unfair trade practices that have ripped our country off and American workers off. It has hollowed out our middle class. It has destroyed our heartland, and the president is focused on reshifting our global economy to ensure that America is once again the manufacturing superpower of the world.
Last night, President Trump told reporters his so-called Liberation Day would mean a rebirth for the United States.
I think this is going to be an amazing, I call it a lot of different names, but it's really, in a sense, it's a rebirth of a country, because how we could have afforded to do what we did. We helped everybody, and they don't help us. The term I like best probably is the liberation of America. It's the liberation of this country, because it's incredible. Look, we have $36 trillion in debt for a reason, and that accumulates over a long period of time. So I think what you're going to be seeing over the next couple of days will be very inspiring to a lot of people.
We can now go live to Washington to speak to our international correspondent, Sarah Firth. Sarah, thank you for joining me. First of all, what more do we know about this so-called Liberation Day in America?
Yes, so as you heard President Trump saying just there are many names for it, Leigh Ann. It's all very secretive at the moment. We've had the White House press conference just taking place. Not really many more details about exactly what we can expect. But what we do know right now for certain, the time and the place, is going to be 4 p.m. at the Rose Garden. Liberation Day, according to some, the event itself called Make America Wealthy Again. And this is going to be the announcement from the president of what is expected by many to be the most aggressive tariffs announced yet. But we're going to have to wait and see until that event. At the moment, we've been told that the president is discussing with trade advisors, with his brilliant team, according to the White House press secretary, to come up with this deal that she said just a short time ago will mean more jobs, more investments, more money in the pocket of American people. That's what the White House claims.
Sarah, it's all so secretive indeed. We've all been trying to get some information, but do we have any clues at all as to what the potential tariff announcement could actually include?
Well, Leigh Ann, the noises coming from the White House have been a little bit contradictory. You've had various claims made. Now, as a bit of background, what's being said that's on the table, it's thought right now, is that various trade advisors have come to the president and presented plans for tariffs, and he's at the moment deciding which of those plans are best. Some of the ideas that have been floated that we could possibly see is something like a universal tariff, which would be around 20% blanket tariff on all countries around the world. Now, a lot of people say That wouldn't leave much room for negotiation. You've seen one of Trump's top trade advisors, Peter Navarro, he's come out and said, look, over a decade, that would bring in $6 trillion to America. You've had critics hit back at that and say that figure is unrealistic. You would have to negotiate down, and you can't negotiate with the entire world. It's Donald Trump we're speaking about, so perhaps he will think he can. Another possibility that's been on the table, that's being floated and talked about here in DC, is a dollar-for-dollar tariff on each country, so true reciprocal tariffs. Asked at that White House press conference just a short while ago, we heard Caroline Leavitt say, in response to a question as to what exactly in terms of countries talking to the US is going on behind closed doors right now. Are countries calling the US to try and make deals? And she didn't give much information, but she did say, yes, several countries have already got in touch with the United States. But the president, she said, he's focused on one country, and that's America right now.
And finally, Sarah, we talked the other day about market reaction to the announcement of auto tariffs that will come into effect in just a few days' time. What's been the reaction to the news of possibly even more tariffs on top of that?
Yes, and last time, Leigh Ann, as we said, the markets don't like that uncertainty. You've actually had the S&P just come out and have their worst month loss since 2022. Now, all three of the major trading indexes, they've all taken a hit. There was a little bit of a bounce back on Monday. Again, you had the White House press secretary answering questions about this. What is the president going to be looking for ahead of announcing these possible tariffs and with the auto tariffs that have already been announced that we spoke about the other day? She said, look, Wall Street, according to the president, will be absolutely fine. And she also said, remember what President Trump said, that the market is a snapshot in time. Well, if that is the case, Leigh Ann, right now, there is a huge amount of uncertainty. And as we heard from the White House press secretary there, all eyes are going to be on that press conference at 4 p.m. tomorrow in the Rose Garden for the so-called Liberation Day. And as the White House press secretary said, we'll see you tomorrow to see what happens there.
Yeah, I'll definitely be watching tomorrow and maybe see you too. Sarah Firth in Washington, thank you so much for that roundup for us. Let's get into this further now with Nick Loris, Executive Vice President of C3 Solutions. Nick, thanks so much for joining me. So the US had a $1.2 trillion goods trade deficit in 2024, and the largest deficits were with China and Mexico. Now, this is Donald Trump's main point of contention. His administration believes the US has been ripped off by both allies and enemies. Will Trump's proposed tariffs reduce this deficit and make America great again?
Well, thank you for having me. They might reduce the deficit, although that's unclear given all of the reciprocal tariffs and tit for tat that we may see imposed by other countries. But I think the trade deficit number is a little bit misleading. The real reason we have those deficits is because other countries produce goods that American companies and families need at a lower, more efficient cost. I have a trade deficit with my grocery store, but that doesn't mean I'm getting ripped off. It just means they provide something for me that I can't provide at home. And so if we want to talk about the federal national debt, yes, that is an issue worth addressing, but these trade deficit numbers are misleading to scare people that we're somehow getting ripped off, when the reality is we benefit a lot from this global exchange of goods and services.
The extent of Trump's tariffs plans are still pretty much largely unknown, as Sarah Firth was just explaining to us. However, on Sunday, he said that reciprocal tariffs will target all nations that impose duties on US goods. As a US-based company, what is your analysis on the messaging surrounding the implementation of these tariffs? Has it been clear enough?
Well, it's not been clear enough. The only thing clear about it is so far we know the economic costs of these tariffs are significant, and they're only going to get worse the longer this trade war persists. We've seen costs escalate for American families and businesses, and despite the administration's promise to help bring more manufacturing jobs to the United States, the important thing to remember is that a lot of American manufacturers use steel and aluminum and the goods that we are importing and are now being tariffed and have higher costs. So it's actually going to harm more manufacturing and more businesses than it helps. So no, the implementation has not been clear. I think if you look at the cost of these tariffs, it's only going to get worse the higher these tariffs are and the more aggressive the administration is.
You work for C3 Solutions, who are striving to create a future where economic growth and environmental protection basically go hand in hand. How do you view Trump's drill, baby, drill pledge?
Yeah, well, I do think it's important that we are going to be using natural resources like oil and natural gas for a long time. And the United States not only has a competitive advantage when it comes to that, but also an environmental advantage that we produce oil at a lower emissions rate than most other countries. And so if the world is going to continue using more fossil fuels, which it will by all accounts, then it makes sense to produce here in the United States that has a strong environmental record. At the same time, we could not ignore the large growth in renewables, the opportunities to advance nuclear and geothermal power. And that's where we've been frustrated with the administration's rhetoric to ignore opportunities to expand renewables, wind and solar on federal lands, more transmission lines to get more clean power, and to lower trade barriers so it makes it easier to build clean energy in the United States and abroad.
What is the likely impact of Donald Trump's tariffs on the average Americans? And you there in America for us, you're an American company. What is your perceived view of what's happening now, especially when it comes to global trade?
Yeah, well, this is not going to be good for Main Street. Despite the administration's goals to protect American families and help them, as well as to help the heartland of America, it's going to do far more harm than good. We've seen estimates that this is going to increase costs for families anywhere from $1,200 a year up to $6,000 per year. The more these tariffs persist and are increased. And I understand the Trump administration's willingness to identify the tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers that exist in other countries. We should be working with other countries to reduce them. The reciprocity here should be to lower non-trade barriers and to lower tariffs that are imposed on the United States, rather than have this reciprocity that's only going to increase costs for American families and disadvantage many American businesses who are competing not just in the United States, but in the international market, and all for no real benefit. I think that's the other important part to underscore is we're not going to see any intended achieved benefit of bringing American manufacturing back home as a result of this policy.
Nick Loris, Executive Vice President of C3 Solutions. Your insights were fascinating. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks so much.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. A 63-year-old woman has been rescued from the rubble of a building in Myanmar's capital city. The rescue comes as a ray of hope, even as expectations of finding survivors fade. Over 2,000 people have died in Myanmar in last week's earthquake, which has added to the complications of an ongoing 4-year-long crisis brought on by a civil war. President Putin has ordered the largest conscription drive since the war in Ukraine began. A further 160,000 Russian men have been ordered to be called up to be completed by July. It comes as peace talks drag out. Authorities in Iceland have evacuated a town after fears of a volcano eruption. Lava has begun flowing at a volcano near the town of Grindavik, where some 40 homes have been evacuated. An intense earthquake storm followed the flow, similar to previous eruptions. And Irish actors Paul Mescal and Barry Keoghan will portray members of the Beatles in 4 upcoming movies. Mescal has been named as Sir Paul McCartney, whilst Keoghan will take the part of Ringo Starr. John Lennon will be played by Harris Dickinson, and Joseph Quinn will complete the band as George Harrison. Each film will focus on a different member, with the first release in 2028. Now, Israel has ordered the evacuation of most of Rafah, with a warning that forces will return to combat in great force. It comes a day after the bodies of more than a dozen emergency workers were recovered from a mass grave in the region. The US has said it expects all parties on the ground in Gaza to comply with humanitarian law. We can now go to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Trent Murray. Trent, thanks for joining me. The United Nations is demanding answers for the aid workers' deaths in Gaza. How has Israel responded to this incident, which did take place on the 23rd of March?
Yeah, Leigh Ann, that's right. That international condemnation continues to grow, as does demands for accountability over this incident, in which, yet again, it seems humanitarian workers have found themselves in the firing line of this war. What the UN Relief Agency is saying is that its convoy was targeted by the IDF, a convoy that included 5 ambulances, 1 fire truck and a UN vehicle, killing 15 of those workers. It included 8 members of the Palestinian Red Crescent, 6 members of the Gaza Civil Defence Force, as well as 1 UNRWA member, of course, the UN agency that looks after Palestinian refugees. What the Israeli military is saying today is that they did indeed fire on those vehicles. They have released a statement saying that the vehicles were, in their words, advancing suspiciously without headlights or emergency signals. They go on to say that 1 Hamas operative was killed, as well as several other militants. But what they are not commenting on are these allegations that those humanitarian relief workers were then placed in a mass grave, in some cases still wearing their paramedic uniforms. It is that incident which is really causing concern amongst the relief groups. The UN is saying that these humanitarian workers were killed while they were trying to save lives. The International Red Cross and Red Crescent says this has been the deadliest attack on its workers in more than 8 years.
Trent, the UN Food Agency is closing all of its bakeries in the Gaza Strip as food supplies dwindle under the Israeli blockade. Is Hamas now under growing pressure from Israel to accept changes to their ceasefire agreement?
Yeah, that blockade now almost reaching 1 month since those critical supplies were able to enter the Gaza Strip. And according to aid agencies, we are now seeing some of the results of that. The UN World Food Programme today saying all of the bakeries across Gaza have now been closed due to a lack of supplies. We are seeing a memo which has been released amongst some of those UN staff saying that they are running out of food and they no longer have enough rations and flour stock to be able to make bread. Now, what the Israelis are saying is that the amount of food that was sent in during the ceasefire period should cover the needs for the roughly 2.3 million people living within the Gaza Strip. They have released some numbers saying 25,000 trucks entered the Strip during that time, and then in a fairly strongly worded attack on Hamas, they said there is more than enough food for a long period of time for the people of Gaza if Hamas lets the civilians have it, is how they end that statement.
And also, let's just shift gears slightly. Israel says it has killed a Hezbollah official in a deadly Beirut airstrike today. What more do we know, and what does this mean for the shaky ceasefire?
Yeah, that's right. Hassan Badia was the target of that strike, according to the Israelis. They hit in the early hours of this morning in Dahia, in the southern suburbs of Beirut, the part of the Lebanese capital that does continue to really see a number of these airstrikes, a real Hezbollah stronghold. The Israelis are saying that he was a member of a Hezbollah unit that was coordinating with Hamas, in their words, and was working on a significant and imminent terror attack against Israeli civilians. Lebanese security sources are saying that 4 people were killed in that strike, including Hassan Badia and his son. But of course, as you rightly say, it does come at a time where there is meant to be a ceasefire right now between Hezbollah and Israel. The Northern Front has been relatively quiet in recent months following that ceasefire. But what we're sort of more seeing broadly, I think, is in the arena of this conflict is tensions are starting to rise once again, not just in the north, but of course as Israel steps up its military manoeuvres once again within the Gaza Strip. And of course, as the US says it's now increasing its airstrikes on the Yemen-based Houthis, it would appear right now, as I say, tensions across the wider Middle East are starting to rise once more.
Trent Murray in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining me. Let's take another look at some of the other stories making headlines today. Residents in Florida will head to the polls today as voters choose a replacement for Mike Waltz, President Trump's national security advisor. Tuesday's other winner will also succeed former Republican Matt Gaetz, whom Trump originally picked as his attorney general before he withdrew. Citizens in Wisconsin will also get the chance to vote on Tuesday. Control of the House is not at stake, but the outcome could provide some relief for Republicans in the narrowly divided chamber. Jordan Bardella, president of the French far-right National Rally, has criticised the sentencing and election ban of Marine Le Pen, accusing authorities of intentionally blocking his party from taking power. Le Pen was barred from running for office for 5 years and given a 4-year prison sentence for embezzlement on Monday. She intends to appeal the decision, which currently prevents her from running for the French presidency in 2027. The US prosecutors will seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The direction came from US Attorney General Pam Bondi, who called the shooting a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination. Mangione has pleaded not guilty and is currently awaiting trial in a New York federal prison. And the Greek islands of Paros and Mykonos have been hit by flash floods, with heavy rainfall set to continue today. The Civil Protection Agency has warned residents to stay indoors, and schools have also been closed. There are currently no reports of injuries on the islands, which are popular tourist destinations. Taiwan has condemned large-scale Chinese military exercises around the island and strongly criticized a series of provocative videos posted on social media by China, saying they aren't conducive to peace. China's military called the Joint Navy, Air Force and rocket exercises a stern warning against Taiwan independence. Will Wayne Williams reports.
Chinese Eastern Theatre Command announced the exercises early on Tuesday. Well, it's not clear exactly how many vessels and aircraft were involved. One thing we do know is that the Shandong aircraft carrier was spotted by the Taiwanese Defense Ministry. China only has 3 aircraft carriers, and so this in itself could be a particularly strong signal from Beijing. Shortly after the drills commenced, China also released a series of propaganda videos as well as a poster entitled "Closing In." In one of the videos, it depicted Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te as a bug hanging from a pair of chopsticks over a burning Taiwan. China views Taiwan as a part of its sovereign territory and Lai as a separatist, and it does not rule out taking the island by force. Tensions have been increasing since Lai came into power early last year, as he has distanced himself from China and maintained a close relationship with the US. These tensions have particularly come to a head in this past month, with him declaring China a foreign hostile state. Yesterday, the US Defense Secretary wrapped up talks with Japan and the Philippines, where they discussed increasing deterrence against Chinese aggressiveness in the Taiwan Strait. And the timing of this, may have indeed had an impact on these drills taking place today. Other than that, US President Donald Trump is about to unveil a series of new tariffs, and there has also been talk about potential sanctions against Chinese officials as well as Hong Kong officials in relation to alleged human rights abuses. Now, these tensions are something that Taiwanese people are very used to. They've grown up their entire lives with the constant threat of China looming over them. That said, as the tensions are increasing, these military drills are becoming more frequent and more intensive. Taiwanese people are starting to feel more and more concerned about what may be in store for them in the future.
Will Wayne Williams in Taiwan, thank you very much. Let's take a look at the top business news now. Tesla's sales in key European markets fell again in March, according to data out on Tuesday. Sales in France, Sweden, Denmark and the Netherlands have fallen for a third straight month, ahead of first quarter figures out on Wednesday. Billionaire CEO Elon Musk, a close ally of President Trump, has stirred controversy by courting far-right parties in Europe. Now, gold has sailed above $3,140 per ounce to uncharted territory as US tariffs fast approach. According to Julius Baer, gold's recent bull run has benefited from two drivers: growing demand from central banks beginning in spring 2022 and the return of Western safe haven seekers this year. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs has raised the probability of a US recession to 35% from 20%. Turning to the sports news now, the Russian-born tennis player Daria Kasatkina says she is emotional and excited to begin a fresh chapter in her career under the Australian flag at the ongoing Charleston Open. That comes after she was granted permanent residency last week. The 27-year-old has been playing on the tour as a neutral athlete after Russian and Belarusian players were banned from competing under their own flags following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The world number 12, who lives in Dubai and trains in Spain, now plans to make Melbourne her home. And world number 2 golfer Rory McIlroy says he's dealing with an elbow issue ahead of next week's Masters. He finished joint 5th at the Houston Open on Sunday after an impressive final round, but said his elbow had been bothering him. The Masters, which is the only one of golf's 4 majors that McIlroy has not won, takes place at Augusta National in Georgia from the 10th to the 13th of April. A reminder of our top stories. The world waits anxiously for Trump's impending tariffs as businesses, consumers and investors prepare for an all-out trade war. Israel issues evacuation warnings for Rafah, vowing to return to combat in great force after the bodies of emergency workers are discovered. And China launches military drills around Taiwan as a warning against Taiwanese independence. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. The Dressing Room is coming up next. And of course, don't miss Tom Burges Watson with a GNT. Good night.
At our Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place. Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
Welcome to the dressing room with Arabiya News. We have a massive guest here today. We've got one of our guys actually that's not here. He's globetrotting. I don't know what he's doing at the moment.
He's on holiday again.
Is he on holiday?
Again.
But listen, Joe Cole's not in here, but we've got a very, very worthy replacement. And it's the one and only. Actually, let me introduce him properly, right? 2 Premier Leagues, yeah? He's got an FA Cup, yeah? That's actually what he's parading around Miami with at the moment.
Yeah, Joe is, yeah.
Yeah, the Emirates Cup.
Well, skateboarding, by the way.
Yeah, doing all of that. If go on his Instagram, you'll see him. He's got a League Cup, right? He's also a DJ, and he's a pundit extraordinaire. Listen,
extraordinaire.
I played with this guys at Wolves, yeah? He then went on to have a great career for himself. Obviously, he went on to Everton, then he went to Man City, then he went to West Brom. Now he's like a proper pundit, like everybody respects. And I've just got to give him so much cred because the journey's been brilliant, hasn't it? So
cheers,
we got Jolien Lescott, everybody. Round of applause.
Not
What
bad,
a geezer.
not bad. Colin watches
That's
back,
the best
man.
intro yet,
Yeah,
man.
man.
Listen,
Yeah.
Let me just tell you something. Like,
Natural.
listen, as I was saying before, I went on loan from Chelsea to Wolves in
I
the
never knew that.
Championship.
Yeah,
You didn't know?
most people don't know that, yeah.
I went for a month, geez.
That was how long ago?
What, they sent you back?
No, remember,
Dave Jones.
you could loan for
Oh,
a
you
month
go
back
for a
then.
month.
No,
Sorry.
I know. That would be the best story ever, but I ain't got a story on that.
Yeah.
Well, so basically, what happened with me was I went to Wolves on loan for a punishment.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Punishment?
I was coming in late. Claudio Ranieri had enough of me, and he said, "Nah, you need to get out." Dave Jones was the only taker.
Well,
Mate, he was not, he gave him a debut.
Coincidentally, yeah, but we all had the same
He gave
agent
him
at the time.
Oh yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And he had Dave Jones.
That's
as
what I'm
well.
saying,
yeah,
exactly.
Dave Jones. Also,
Yeah.
that made sense. I didn't even know that.
I do that. I do that.
But that's what happens in football. Like
Mate, I like Dave Jones.
Dave Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a good manager for me, yeah.
He gave me my
His
debut.
debut.
He really,
Yeah.
he believed in me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, like with Dave
You had the
Jones.
same agent though at the time, though.
Yeah.
So I think
it made sense.
I think he believed in a lot of the
They get
aftermath.
into all the young kids, don't they? Yeah.
But Dave Jones for me was unbelievable. Like I remember walking in and he just made me feel welcome. Obviously, that was the first time I met you properly, like at your football club, because I think we had run-ins with the under
It would have been
England.
Yeah, it would have been what 17s or something.
Yeah,
it would have been young
yes.
age groups then.
Yeah, but I only went to one of them, but you were there. And I always remember Jolien just being welcoming and settling me in. Because I had to because remember, I was only there for a month.
Yeah.
And I got called back. The reason why I got told to go to Wolves was because I was coming in late every day. Ranieri had enough of me. And he said, listen, you need to do one because you're disrupting the team.
Yeah.
Like people not respecting me, so you need to get out. So I've gone. I think I played about 5 games.
Yeah.
I remember Paul Ince. You had Paul, in that dressing room, you had Paul Ince, you had Dennis Irwin.
Yeah.
Who else did you have in there?
Paul
That was a ledge. Alex Ray,
Colin Cameron.
Yeah.
Mark Kennedy.
Obviously, I came in because Blakey was injured.
Blakey, yeah. Nathan Blake and
Yeah,
Dean
we had
Sturridge.
George and Dar.
George. What a player he was.
Who else was that?
Studge was there then.
Yeah, he was. He was there.
Would have been there.
I mean, that's a decent team.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
our championship team was outrageous. Because it had nails. Remember, it had like Lee Naylor, me, Paul
Lee
Butler.
Naylor.
Do you know? Sorry,
Go on.
Lee Naylor. He
Was
came
gone
up in
7th.
our thing the other day. We were talking, me, Joe, about the first night out we had under 18s.
Oh yeah, he did come
Mate,
up.
it went a bit
Mental.
sideways. Lee Naylor was there. He don't mind a night out.
Get him on. You should get him on.
Yeah,
it
we
was
get him on,
a
man.
good team.
Good guy.
Oh yeah, our team was like mad strong. To be fair, like
Got
Ince.
promoted that season.
Yeah, Ince, Colin Cameron, Alex Ray on the wings with Sean Newton and Mark Kennedy
Newton.
and Kenny Miller.
Yeah, Kenny
That's
Miller.
a decent
Yeah,
chap.
team was
Oh, my
stacked,
God.
man. Our
Yeah,
team was stacked.
it was a good team. Kenny Miller, he was he
Yeah,
surprised
baller.
me
Yeah, he's
as a
baller.
person.
Yeah. Oh, 50. No, but
He was like he's basically a rapper.
yeah, 25 cent.
Kenny Kenny Miller. Listen, I know he's coach. He's a coach now, isn't he? He's a
I
manager.
think so, yeah.
He's doing something.
They used to call him 50 pence.
Listen, Kenny Miller, like, I used to love him. I used to love him because he was down. He was like one of those. He was a brother. He was a brother, wasn't he?
He come down with like spiky hair. Next thing you know, he's got skin fade. Escalades and spinning rims and that.
I wonder what he's like saying to his players now. Like, when
he's aggressive.
He's aggressive.
Yeah, he's aggressive.
He's always an aggressive fella.
Scottish man.
He was aggressive on the pitch, wasn't he?
But he always made a difference. Like, he was a runner.
Kenny was
the
quality.
The standard was high. And Dave Jones, as I said, Dave Jones made me feel so good when I went there. And I was actually, listen, I went back and I went back to, obviously, we had Sunderland away when I went back to Chelsea, and then I'd scored. So something did work, and it clicked for me whilst I was at Wolves, because I weren't taking the piss no more. I went back to Chelsea. More professional. Yeah. And I saw a team bond like no other. That season, you guys got promoted, didn't it?
Yeah.
So that was a good time for you guys.
Yeah, but you're being late's just part of your personality, mate.
Well, it was.
You've been late for the pod like 4 or 5
times.
Oh,
give me a break. This is what I'm trying to say.
It's still not gone.
No.
Send him alone. Send him out to another pod. Send him to another pod for a month.
I was here before you today.
Yeah, but I've never been late.
And I've travelled all the way from Como.
That's what I'm saying.
But I've never been late.
It's not a race to who's here first. It's whether you're late or not. Yeah.
I'm telling you, man. Anyway. So let's moving on swiftly. So we're here because you have signed up, because you're still playing football now, aren't you?
Yeah.
So the Baller League.
Yeah, I'm
what's that saying?
This is obviously going out after tonight. I'm due to play tonight for Micah's team. I'm his wild card. So I think it.
What's the team called?
You're his
Deportivo.
wild card.
Yeah. So each team gets 2 wild card players.
Right.
So
who's the other one?
I don't know. I don't know. He could pick anyone. He could be anyone. Like
he didn't call me.
I think he knows.
He knows about your knee, man.
Yeah, I think he knows. You're not capable. But no, yeah. So we're playing tonight for Deportivo. It's his Alan Shearer and Gary Lineker's team.
Oh, really?
They're the managers. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. To be fair, because I still mess about, and it's funny.
I'm jealous of that.
But it's funny. It's like,
but you've always had a bad knee, though.
Yeah. But I always managed it, because I do the stuff that we had to do when we played to train. So now I just do it a little bit less, but I still do it so I can play. You know what I mean? But yeah, when we play and you see all these like techie guys, and then you realise technique and talent is like so far from the actual game of football. Yeah, it's like it's nowhere near the same sport. We played in a tournament last week with like the guys are playing, some ex-pros and some like YouTubers and that, and we won this tournament. It was like we played this team, and like for a few minutes we just concentrated a little bit more. 5
that's
goals.
All it is,
and that's it.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we can.
They haven't got that.
They haven't got like when that pass is going there. I know his only option is that.
They can't read the game.
No. Mate,
that is reading the game.
It's crazy.
That comes down to.
It's crazy.
Sounds like me. Mate, you lot read the game a lot better than I did. I tell you that. Do you know what? I always say that because I've obviously got sons that play. I just say, listen, if you read the game, if you read if you're 2-3 steps ahead on predicting where the ball's going to land or what pass is going to be on at what time, so you can position yourself to get into the right. Like, it's priceless. You don't even have to be as quick as the quickest player on the pitch. You could still affect the game in the positive way.
It's the mentality of working for each other, I think, rather than just trying to do this little bit of skill, step over and score a goal.
But not go nowhere.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's the reading of the game for me is like, say if you're closing down, I'm covering you a little bit, but the ball might go there, so I go there. I think that's so simple, but some people just can't even see that.
100%. Yeah, like the angle of approach is like, well, if you go there, that means I can mark there. That means that can't happen. Yeah, players don't.
People can't see.
Well, let's talk about your. Obviously, you've been doing coaching as well. Yeah. So you've coached England under 21s.
Yeah. Well, parts of the staff. Yeah, taking all the credit and seniors as well.
And you went seniors with Lee Carsley and Ashley Cole. Yeah. How was that? Like, I remember seeing. Listen, mate. For me, my head was big when I see you on the England team, the England coaching staff. I think I messaged you straight away. I was like, bro, This is a
It's
big
mad. It's
boy
surreal,
moment.
yeah.
This is the best thing about Carlton. When anything good happens to anyone,
Oh, I
he's
love
so
it.
happy for
Yeah, man.
everyone.
Well, I don't know why people aren't happy
Yeah,
for
it's
people,
mad,
especially
isn't
when
it?
you know
Yeah,
someone.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
I
So,
know, yeah.
No,
like I
because
said, we
you
will
gotta
message.
understand. Yeah, like because you got to
Messages going
understand, there's
on.
some big moment, man.
Yeah,
Like
man,
that's
it is.
like one of your own is up there on the TV representing his
But
country. So
you,
he's done.
you
He's
are
done.
one of the best hype men. You
Oh
are
yeah,
a
mate.
good hype
I'm a
man.
cheerleader. Get the
You
pom poms
are.
up, man.
You're very
Get the
good.
pom poms up.
Hype man,
You're
hype
good.
man. Yeah.
You are good.
But that's what I'm saying. But so how was that feeling for you? Like just being on
Surreal.
the being
Just
in that
surreal, yeah.
in the
the
dugout.
environment.
Yeah.
To be fair, like I said, it was just being asked to do the 21s was special. Do you know what I mean? Because luckily for me, like I've had a few opportunities after playing, and I've been asked to do them due to me, not necessarily. Oh, I need a coach. Let's get Joe, or I need someone to help the loans. It was like, no, I think he's the person for it. So, and it was the same with the 21s and the seniors. Like so. The privilege was being asked by Cars. You know what I mean? I played with him at Everton, and someone I get on and have a huge amount of respect for. Yeah. So for him to just ask me, not one of just someone, he wanted me. So that was the massive honour.
That's a massive testament to your character and the person you actually are. Look, you're very knowledgeable about the game anyway. When you see you on doing TNT or wherever what channels you go on, we know that you know the game because the way you simplify it when you're talking about it, you simplify it because sometimes we make it some people make football sound so hard when it actually isn't. And I've noticed that your delivery is like you make the game look so simple and it's good, it's digestible for the punter that's listening.
I think we all would have worked with Glenado.
Yeah, Glenado.
Yeah,
don't get him started.
Mate.
Do not get him started with Glenado. He loves it.
No, he's my best
every
man.
show.
Best man, I worked on that because that's how he spoke to me. He didn't speak to me like that, but that's how he spoke, and that's how I understood it. It was like so clear. I was like, oh, I thought of that, but I didn't know that's what it meant. Okay. And then it was just so clear the way he was delivering messages, and even when he was speaking to like wingers or forwards, I was like, that makes sense to me, and I could relate it to my position.
For me, he's just like I put him up there with Mourinho.
Yeah.
Just because at Southampton, mate, we were like we were sixth position when he left.
Yeah.
Southampton were relegation battle the whole time. We were in like sixth position. For me, what I noticed with him, he worked a lot of me on the mental side of the game, visualization, which I know some of the under 10s is my kids' team, but that's what I tried to work on them. Their mentality is probably one of the most important things because if you don't get that right, you probably ain't gonna make it.
I remember when he used to come, and when he first come, and he banned me from speaking in the warm-ups. I was like, what?
What do you mean?
Like he upped my professionalism, to be fair. So like, it was like, no, this is serious. You've had a knee injury as well. I don't think you're taking the warm-ups as serious as you should. Yeah. So I don't want to hear your voice. I want you to concentrate. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. And like, just things like that I just took for granted. And then, as I said, he was so, coaching-wise, he was so far ahead of and the details of how each position was.
Okay, so
important.
we talk about details. What are we detailing here? Like wait a pass or what foot to take it on? Back
formation.
So the formation was huge. So he was the first coach that we did everyone played 4-4-2.
Would you play
3-4-3?
Oh, we played 4-3-3, but like Marino came on and played it, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, he's doing this."
Yeah, well, he did that with us at first. It was like Cole Court, Kenny Miller, and Jeremy Aladier. That's who we had up front. Yeah. We played Ipswich. Oh, yeah. No, it was 4-3-3, yeah. So we were playing Ipswich. They would come, and they were 3-5-2, like top of the league, cruising. So he said to the strikers, never heard it before, he said, don't come back. I was like, huh?
Yeah.
What?
The same with us.
He said,
what?
He said, don't come back.
To the strikers?
To the strikers. So
yeah. The front three.
Front three. So we had our front
occupied,
three.
Then you would they ain't bombing on.
So what Pep is doing now, like he said that to at Wolves, and then all of a sudden there was about 5. And then now we're bapping them in midfield. 2-0 at half time. I'm like, oh my god!
And it was the interaction between the fullback and then for me, like the movement, them tucking in. Mate, he was so good.
Oh yeah, he had me. He like build up and that. He would want me on the ball. I was like, oh yeah,
I
can't wait.
By him, man.
I would have loved to have seen him at England manager again because I think he would have done something.
Yeah. Well, he was going to change the formation that I feel suited the players the best.
Oh, 100%.
So we were going to play a 3 at the back for England, and that would have just.
And I met him probably about 6 months ago. I started with a life coach and started doing meditation again. First time I've done it since Glenn Hoddle.
Yeah.
And it's really good for me because it makes me just like I like a bit of hot yoga. It makes me really like zen. Mate, I bumped into him the following week.
Mad at it.
See,
and it was,
law of
then I was
attraction,
talking
man.
to him about, and he was talking to me about how like that can kind of fix what's in your body. And it's mad. Like he was so far ahead
advanced.
Of his time.
He was definitely advanced.
So far ahead.
So we're talking about England, yeah. So look, you obviously coached there. You watched the game last week, did you? Did you digest it?
What the seniors? I watched a bit of the 21s and then I watched the seniors. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So I'm quite intrigued with this. So. Do you watch the 21s more than you'd watch the seniors? Are you more interested in the 21s because you're more invested in it?
Yes, because of the staff. No disrespect to the players, but a lot of the players that we worked with have moved up. So I just watch the players that you can gravitate to and you have relationships to. So I watched some of the 21s. I watched a bit of the France game.
Yeah.
And then
unbelievable, Nwaneri.
Yeah. That was the Portugal game.
That was the Portugal one. Yeah, great goal, wasn't
it? Yeah. So obviously, but I don't know him.
You don't know,
like Job and all them guys. This is a new batch. So yeah. It was nice to see that. But like then I watched the seniors, and it's like the lads that I've worked.
Did you take in over the game, Bridgie? Like
I watched bits of it.
What do you think?
Done well, but they're just. It's hard, isn't it, playing for England? I think you're always going to get.
Critiques, yeah.
Critiques all the time.
Not everyone isn't happy.
Yeah, I'm just a massive Phil Foden fan.
Yeah, but
and I know he took a little bit. He's took a lot of stick, and he's got to play the number 10 role, and that's it for me.
Listen,
that's my opinion.
I saw
anyway.
on some other podcasts and everything that there was this big debate about Phil Foden and his role in that England national team, and that he hasn't actually really cut the mustard just yet. And is there actually a space for him, or is
definitely?
it?
But you say that, right? Yeah. This is my thing. When you say that, this might be but have any of them really, like they haven't really got to the level they should do. So, I feel like
what the players individually.
Okay, it's a bit like when I look back when I was playing. Well, I wasn't playing. I was sat on the bench. But it was like you had like Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel the formation was played that suited the players we had, or one of them had to miss out.
Yeah.
And it would have been better.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's probably what's happened with the team
with Phil
Foden. That's my
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm thinking because when I was watching the debate and a few debates actually, and I was thinking when you look at Phil Foden, he's such a renowned talent. Like the talent that he's got and what he could do with the ball, just you want to see that transfer from what he was doing for Man City last year, not this year so much, but last year, and where he's got to in his career because of his talent. Now I want to see that transferred every game. Really, I want the ball to go to because he's so creative. Yeah,
and
he's got
an imagination.
Thing.
No way,
it's not as easy as people think. That's
is he
sure.
being helped? Will he be helped by Tuchel? And will Tuchel get the best out of him eventually?
I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. It's like you would hope that, but it's hard to say who's like what needs to happen.
You talk about the number 10 role,
but no, that's different. The role and the player style are different. Like we associate number 10 with that role and that flair and stuff, but Jude doesn't play with that.
No,
but he affects the game.
Yeah.
Lampard,
Jude play another position.
Frank didn't play like that.
No.
Frank was a number 10. He wore 8. He was a number 10. Did he have much flair? No, but he affected the game.
Yeah.
So that you can't.
That's another argument. That is.
I see a thing that Gary Neville said the other day that England should have played 3-5-2.
100%.
So should have played Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard in midfield, Becks on the left, Ash wing back, 3 centre backs. Gary Neville might have missed out. But I remember hearing him say it. That probably would have suited better.
Yeah. But the two strikers, Wayne Rooney and any other striker, like Michael Owen or whatever it is. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Like so, three midfielders.
Do you know, there's something about Phil Foden, because I haven't watched a lot of football. I remember I went to an England game a few years ago with my kids. Mate, it was the warm-up and little bits of his touch, the way he touches, the way he can, like... It reminded me a little bit of David Silva.
Yeah.
Reminded me of David. And David Silva was probably the best player I played with, I reckon.
He's definitely that type of player, but is he going to live up to the David Silva heights of respect after his career? Because David Silva, for me,
David wasn't respected when he played.
No.
No.
I still
don't even think he's
I think it's the players that have played with him that have come out and said how good he is.
I still don't even think he's appreciated.
Man City fans do, though. I've got a lot of Man City fans.
He didn't have a bad spell. There was never a period of time where someone questioned David Silva. For a month, never mind for half a season.
I don't think you could ever question him, mate.
Never. He didn't miss games. He played, and when he played,
that half gets taken for granted, though, doesn't it?
Availability.
Yeah, and I always tell young players. No matter what, you can have a poor game or anything, but always be available.
100%.
Because if you're not available, how are you supposed? You could be the best player in the world, but you're never available. So then, what's the point? We look at Neymar. Yeah. For instance, I know this is going off tangent a little bit, but you look at Neymar, even when he was at Saudi now, he wasn't available.
Nah, man.
So you can't see that he's world class because you can't play. No one's seen you. So I always say, look after your health and make sure that you get that on that pitch.
But that's the hardest thing to do because, like you said, people take it for granted that to stay fit for 10 seasons, you have to do the right things. 90% of the time. You can't go out every week. You can't.
The sacrifice.
Is it sacrifice? It's just choices. The choices you have to make are different to wanting to be the best player of the month.
All right. So when you come in today, you had a choice. Yeah.
Here we go.
There was a rum and coke waiting on the table for him. And he's got Ballers League later on.
Yeah, man.
I said, "Do you fancy a bit of that?" And he was like, "No, got a game later."
Back another time.
That is the choice. That is the professionalism of Julian Lescott, man. I'm telling you, man. It's still running in his blood till this day.
It's funny because we got there last week, and we played this tournament. It's like ex-pros and that. And everyone's sitting around, and I get the mini bands out and started doing that.
Oh, no, you're not doing that.
But everyone's laughing, We get in through the halfway through the tournament, lads, on my back, on knees. I'm like, are you laughing at me in there?
Exactly.
But now I'm still fresh in that.
Look at me, I'm still going, mate.
I'm still doing bits, yeah, man. You gotta warm up properly, man.
All right, so let's go through the results of the FA Cup. It's quarterfinals, the Emirates Cup, right? So, did you watch any of the games?
I watched Sunday's game. Saturday, my son was playing, so I was.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who's your son playing for?
He plays for Preston.
Is it?
He plays for Preston. Yeah, his first game back for a while, so I went to watch that. They beat Bradford.
Did they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant, man.
Yeah, it's good.
So, do you go down there a lot?
Whenever, obviously, I've tried to get there all the time, but if I'm working, then you can't.
How does that feel to have a footballer son?
He's 17. It's mad because, a few of the times this season he's played up 21s and that. They play in the week. I've been working and that, so I've been missing the games and that. But on the Saturdays, I make sure I'm not working every weekend, so I can go. I'll be able to go this weekend. He's got a game.
I've got a footballer son as well. Yeah. It's so rewarding when you see them and they're doing bits, man, and you're thinking, and they're listening. Yeah, the thing about it, because you can have a footballer son, or wants to follow in your footsteps or whatever, but they have to be able to listen. It's the hardest thing to do.
My oldest son, he made his debut for Blackpool, but just he didn't want to. Like I said, the professionalism of it that comes with then once you're at a level where your talent is not above that, then there comes the requirement of making the decisions and the choices, and he couldn't commit to that. So it's like, okay.
Have you always given advice, and have they always taken it?
I don't. I try not to. I try to give them advice on certain things, but I would never risk my relationship with them.
No, that's the main thing.
So
I'm not interested in
my Parker. If I said something to me, he goes, shut up, stop talking to me.
Yeah.
Whereas Carter, the youngest son of Carter's, he'll run up to me at half time and go, "What can I do better?"
Yeah.
Oh, I love
different,
that.
It's mad, innit? And as I said, I used to know they get in the car, they put the headphones on. They don't want to discuss it, so then we don't discuss it. But I used to be like, "Well, don't complain."
Yeah.
Like if you don't want to hear what I'm gonna say. Don't complain about how you've performed, or if you're not doing everything you should.
It's one of them. If you want some advice, come to me.
Yeah.
So listen. So we'll just touch on a few of the quarterfinal games. Obviously the FA Cup. We had Fulham that was at home to Palace, right?
Good week for him, eh? Good week.
Fulham didn't even come close, did they? Didn't even touch the sides. They got beat 3-0. At home. That's not like a Fulham team that I've been watching this season. Eze, I heard he was running the things. I didn't see it because I was travelling.
Mate,
I was actually
his goal was a joke.
Nice.
Yeah.
The keeper's getting nowhere near it.
Yeah.
So what do you think? How did Fulham play and how did Palace play?
I only see bits.
Yeah, I only see the
but
goals.
for me, like, he was just brilliant. Like the goal. The keeper's never getting it, is he?
No.
Yeah.
But you can actually see what he's trying to do before he does it, but you're like,
you know where it's going to go. But it's the curl on the ball. It started outside the post and just ducked in and hit the post.
He's been on fire.
And
he
then
obviously scored his first goal for England as well.
And then I think when I see him square the defender up, I'm just thinking,
you know what's happening after that?
You're in trouble. I've been there many times. You're in trouble.
Well, he done the same for England.
Like a highlight of what confidence does.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we all know we've played on the confidence, and when you ain't got none, you probably don't even try that, and then all of a sudden he scores for England, and then he's like,
mad.
Now we dial it up.
Mad. And to be fair, I think he got quite lucky on that goal for England. But, mate, it's one more goal than I ever scored for England, so I'll take it.
You missed an open goal, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
It was open, wasn't it? Didn't he clear off the line?
I told you.
You went round the keeper.
Yeah, and then the geezer spawned from nowhere.
Spawned? It's Call of Duty.
Yeah, Call of Duty. Fortnite. All right, so we're moving on to the Brighton game. Brighton v Forest. Forest beat them on pens in the end.
Great season, man. Both of them teams having a great season, though, aren't they?
Let's talk about Forest, man.
Yeah, man.
Cool, blimey. The vibes down there in that camp there.
Yeah,
it looks proper. I think Coley went down there not so long ago.
We did the game, the City Forest game, and that's probably the camaraderie there.
That's the perfect word for it.
Have you ever had a team? Have you ever been involved in a team like that? You both?
Our team, like when we City and that. Was
it like vibes?
Mate, I swear to God.
Seriously?
Like,
when you're a team and you're...
man.
You want it for each other.
Yeah, man. You want each other to do well.
You're a family, aren't you, as a team? You've got to create that family feel where you just fight
and the
for each other.
circumstances were different to the way Forest has been recruited, but the same things. Like, we was all recruited for City, and everyone just said they're only going for the money. Like, they don't really think they can win or want to win. It's like, no, we're trying to win stuff. So that was like an inside kind of thing. And that's like Forest.
That's hard to get as well, by the way. Like, I know you can just go and buy players, but you've got to get that.
But that's the thing with Forest. They've recruited on the same basis. So a lot of their players weren't wanted at the teams they were at. So now all of a sudden when you come,
like a second chance for
and
them.
now you're loved and you're all under the same circumstance.
The manager helps. So you've got to have a good manager to do that. For
good
the
manager.
As well.
The owner's always in the tunnel.
I don't know, do you?
Huh?
We didn't have a good manager.
No,
Mancini wasn't a good manager.
Are you not having Mancini, though?
Nah, man, he wasn't a good manager.
A bit of needle.
Right, do you know why? Do you know what? I stopped mentioning him. Do you know why? Because I heard Mika say something about him, and I went, "Oh, do you know what? You're lying."
He loved Meeks, though. He did love Meeks. They got on.
Come on, man. We used to do shadow play against mannequins. You only had two options, and that was our football.
Yeah, really?
But we had good players.
You can't. Look, they went and won the league. They won the league because of the players.
See, look, for me looking from the outside in, right, to seeing what you lot are talking about there, I'm thinking Mancini must have been a worldie. What a manager.
I think he was what we needed. I'm not going to disrespect him.
So what was his style?
So obviously, Mark Hughes had assembled a lot of us, and we were just trying to outscore teams.
Do you know what the worst thing about that was? I felt like a letdown because...
What, to Mark Hughes?
There were 7 draws we had.
Yeah.
I think if we had nicked wins, mate, there's no chance he's getting sacked.
And the mad thing was, we had a game in hand, and I think if we won that game in hand, we would have been second. Yeah. So I think it was happening anyway. I don't think it was down to the results, but we was outscoring teams or trying to outscore teams, and then we've come, and then it kind of went on its head. But we still had a bit of that element to us, and then all of a sudden,
and then play a different.
We had defenders that wanted to defend.
Yeah. Like that's the thing.
Bridgie and Meeks could defend.
What is the state of English defending now?
Because not English, just defending.
Just defending in general across the world.
It's not this defending.
Because I went to watch Como v Empoli, and I still think recruitment goes, and I think this is a general thing nowadays because everyone wants to play out from the back.
Yeah.
So I think recruitment goes, what's he like on the ball? Before, is he good at heading?
100%.
The game's just changed so much.
Is he good at reading the game?
But what's mad is, like, you could be the best in possession. So if you're good in the ball, you will get recruited. But what is not considered for me is the fact that if you're average in possession, but you're a good defender and you're having a solid game defensively, you will improve. Your confidence will allow you to improve
with the players around you.
Especially, but if you're having a good game in possession, but you're not having a great game defensively, all of a sudden you ain't as good.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
so the trait that you've bought him on, you've recruited him on, is irrelevant now because now that he can't do the things that he's going to be exposed to, which means the thing that you brought him for. Yeah. Which is why I think goalies, you're buying goalies that can distribute the ball, not great at saving, but then all of a sudden when he lets one in that he should have saved, his distribution, he doesn't want to play that pass. His confidence is gone. Yeah. So now he can't play that pass. So the bit that you've recruited him on is irrelevant.
Like is it Nana?
Anana.
Yeah. Anana for
United.
Yeah. Like brilliant in possession. I remember the first game I watched Man United play with him in the team. He was on the halfway line. He was just getting the ball. He was like a what do you call it? A quarterback. Yeah. I was thinking, but he's brilliant at it. But then when he gets asked questions about going the other way, like you see.
But then it impacts that. Now he doesn't want to play.
Now
that
he's got no confidence. Yeah.
It's mad. It's mad that recruitment.
Yeah, game's changed. But
because it's, mate, it's a softer game.
Oh yeah,
it gets softer for all the years. I remember speaking to ex-pros when I was playing out that everyone's saying how soft it is, but there's more yellow cards.
Did you not see that? You must have seen that online then.
Yes, someone sent it. There's one thing that stood out to me. There's more yellow cards, but it's a softer game.
So in 2006 and 2007, that season to last season, there was 25% less tackles.
Really?
Last season,
but
33% more yellow cards.
The game's gone, mate.
Yeah. Do you think that's the... Okay, so you talk about that. Do you think that's the referee being too sensitive, or is VAR or VAR's bringing them back?
Everything. I think it's everything.
Football, yeah, like it's just changed so much.
When I look at like football, the way we talk about football's changed, and it has changed to some extent. And I was talking about this the other day. Would you, both of you, be able to play in this era? I've got my philosophy on this. Do you want to hear it?
Okay, go on.
All right, so
we're going to guess it, are we?
Yeah.
I don't think we've got a choice.
My philosophy on this scenario, right? I feel, look, we were trained to play in the era and coached to play in the era that we were in, but we were still footballers, athletes, whatever you want to call us. Yeah, we could actually, because of our build or whatever we were, and the way we took on board information, we could translate that. Being a footballer to this era and just be coached the same way that they're being coached now and still do a good job. Do you believe in what I'm saying there, or do you kind of disagree?
I believe. I'm not saying. I'm not saying we could all play. I'm not saying we could all play, but I believe I could play now easier because I'm giving more information. Like the amount of time
because of the players, right? Because for me, I'm not. If I was playing now, and Sean Wright Phillips was playing, and Aaron Lennon, and they're getting at me, I could be sent off within God knows what.
Because of the rules.
Because the yellow cards just come out too quick.
But on the flip side of that, you're considering it in the tactics that you had to deem them that. So now, especially for defenders, stand there when we've got the ball, which means if we lose it, I can't get back. So now it's not my fault. And coaches are taking that responsibility away from defenders. We wasn't told that. We was told, this is what I want you to do. If you get it wrong, even though I've told you to do it, you're out the team. So you had to figure it out differently. We were told just like a basic. Yeah. You wasn't told every pass you had to make, every scenario, where to stand.
You had freedom.
Yeah, but you also had to figure it out.
Yeah.
There wasn't every data stat that covered every
player.
Well,
that is the thing.
Like when we started playing, probably different. I know you're a little bit younger than us, Cole. Like, you didn't see every opponent you played.
No.
You got there and you was like, who is he? Number 7. Yeah. Okay, it's number 7. He's right-footed.
That's it. That was your basic.
Figure it out. So go out there.
Figure it out.
Within 10 minutes, figure out what he can do and what he can't do. Now,
it's running you.
So imagine now you're being told, you don't even know if he was quick. You didn't even know. Now I've got top speeds. Now I know how fast he is. So now I know I can't get that tight because he's going to run me. So
you never used to really study the game until late when all clips started coming out.
That's what I'm saying. You couldn't.
I remember the manager going to me, "Yeah, you know what he's like," and I'm thinking, "You obviously don't know me. I don't watch much football."
That's what I'm saying. So I think if you
the detail into it now.
Now, if you're giving information, you're definitely giving more information. So
that would help you though.
Yeah,
that would help you get to play in this era. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's what I believe.
That's a good analogy. Because like for me, when I look at it, I think we can. We'll suss it out. Like because we're footballers at the end of the day, athletes, and we could do it. So it was just my intake on the information given to me. How well do I take on board the information given to me, and how well do I execute it? Yeah. That's it.
I'll bring him up again, but don't have a go at me. Glenn Hoddle, right? I would have loved to see what he would do now. against the way the teams play, where they play out from the back. I'd love to just see what he would do.
That's a good question for him when we get him on.
Yeah.
I think he wouldn't stand out as much now because everyone's trying to do the same things. I think about 10 years ago, that's when you would have seen a difference because there wasn't many doing it.
Yeah.
And Glenn could coach players that probably didn't have the capability to perform.
I'll tell you,
which I think every coach is now just coaching a system.
Yeah.
And whether your players can do it or not, it's irrelevant. It's like, well, I want him to play this way. Well, he can't do it.
Yeah.
If he could do it, he wouldn't be
that's
the
true.
team that you're at.
Another manager was up there for me. Gus Poyet, I had him at Brighton, mate.
Yeah.
And he had players which they had brought through. A lot of them come through the leagues with him.
Yeah.
Mate, he was so good at getting players to believe in themselves and play well, but he was just good at it. Like that
was
reminds me of Glenn Dodd. He was good as well, mate. Gus Poyet is another one I haven't mentioned before. He was really good.
All right. Let's do the other half of the quarterfinals. So Preston, obviously your son's team were playing Villa. Your ex-team. Yeah.
Nah, to be fair, I watched that game.
Buzzing for Rashford. I'm so happy for him, mate.
So let's talk about Rashi. Yeah. Let's talk about Rashi. He's coming to some scrutiny, hasn't he? Obviously, the Man United thing. Is it Man United or is it
Man United? It's Man United. It's a bit of both. It's not one. It's never one thing or one component to success or failure, but definitely
something.
It's more United in regards to the team that he was in. Like Aston Villa is a way better team than Man United. Like
that's interesting you say that.
Like they don't. You got to think. Man United had Rasmus Højlund and Garnacho up front. So them three up front, there was Marcus, Rasmus and Garnacho. Who's the best? Marcus.
Yeah.
So the opposition, we have to consider him.
Yeah.
We have to consider him. Bruno is affected the games and all that, but if we stop Rashford, because he needs someone else, then we stop Bruno.
Yeah.
He goes to Villa, they got Ali Watkins, they got Morgan Rogers, they got Asensio. Like now you can't just stop him. So now there's more freedom and there's more space and there's more opportunities and like Rashford could, in my opinion, he's elite, so he might be the icing or the cherry on a cake. If you've got no cake,
yeah.
Like, there's no cake.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. There's no base.
There's no base.
There's no base. There's no flour. There's no flour to even start.
No one wants to eat icing. No one's eating icing, bro. You know, you get sick. You get sick of eating icing. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you've got a cake and then you put a Marcus Rashford in there, he's gonna taste great. He's gonna look good.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, environment, is the most important thing for a footballer nowadays, because I just feel anyway, the footballers that we nurture now are probably a little bit, is it weak-minded, or would I say they haven't got the...
Sensitive.
Yeah, they're sensitive because the era they've grown up in, their social media... Listen, when we used to get battered by a manager, right? And then we'd go, do you know what? Instead of sulking, we'll go, no, I'll show you. You can't batter me like that. You're not getting away with it. I think if you was to do that to a player now, you got to kind of take into consideration about... Okay, he might go home and sulk. You'll lose him. And you don't want that. And I think Rashford comes under that banner. He needs an arm around him. Most players need arms around them. Like,
yeah, but you also...
Yeah, not all.
Not all.
We also didn't... Like, when we spoke about it before, we don't know that situation. We only know what we think. What's being said in the press, what he says in the press. True. But we all know he's got more than enough talent to be one of the best in the Premier League and play for England.
100%.
We all know that.
I just think with any player that you have to build a relationship in order then to critique someone. And I think the manager went in there knowing he's got authority and critiqued someone you haven't built that base on. So I don't know where that's coming from. If you coming in and it's like...
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
If I build up a relationship with you and I know I'm saying that's not good enough, where it's coming from.
It's coming from...
I don't know that. Like, you don't know.
There's no needle in it. There's no... I'm not prejudged you. I know you.
Yeah, I know you. And so you know me. You know this is honest.
That's actually interesting because a lot of players, like obviously, because there's so much turnover for managers nowadays. There's so many managers. Managers don't really get 2 years anymore. Do you know what I mean? So how are you supposed to build that bond with a player when the player's there for 5-6 years? Manager comes in, he might be out the door within 18 months.
100%.
And then you're trying to get the best out of that player. How does that work? How is that? So the manager now has to adapt.
It doesn't have to be. You don't like. So when we did the loans and stuff at City,
Yeah.
we was focusing on building relationships, and these were like kids. It doesn't have to be me and you. It has to be the person you're closest to. If I can gain his respect or their respect or her respect, then you know what it's like. Say you're close, like say let's say JD. JD's closest to his mum.
Yeah.
So if I bond with her, then she says you gotta listen to him. So that it doesn't have to be directly to the person. It just
Manager Lescott, you know.
it just has to be someone that they respect. You know what I mean?
That is, see what I'm saying? This is the quality we're bringing on this pod now. This is like deep thinking because.
But it's not that deep though, is it? It's just obvious. You know what I mean? It's not like okay, when your kids are at school and the teacher shout to them, they would call you and say, "This is what's going on," and then you would have to then relay that message.
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, you say it's simple. Yeah, you see it simple, but a person don't because they don't know about all of that. You're simplifying it. As I said, when you talk about when you're in the punditry, you're doing the punditry. You simplify it just like that. It seems obvious. And until you say it, it is obvious. But a lot of people complicate it. And that is the big problem that managers need to get their head around. Who's his best friend? Or who's the
most influential person in his life?
Try and get the best out of him.
So now I've got time, and it might not be me, it might be my coach, or it might be someone else that can relate to them. And as I said, I think it was Alan Kirbishley was one of the first person I ever heard do something like that. I was at a convention and he was talking about he used to, like this was before social media, look at like films or what was on the night before games, or if you knew there was like going to spend time away with players and just figure out what they might have watched and just sit down and say, "Oh, did you watch so-and-so last night?" It was like something
that's a straight away, boom, got him.
And now it's a common denominator.
That's brilliant.
It's crazy.
That's brilliant. Now, yeah, so that's Rashford. He's back on form. Lovely to see.
Yeah.
And yeah, hopefully he could go on
and win the Champions League.
You never know.
You never know. You never know.
And I know, like, Villa's your team, and I'd like to see them in that scenario. You know, how was your time at Villa actually? Like,
tough, man.
Was it tough at that time?
Yeah,
that when you bonded with Mika?
Nah, Meeks. Well, I was friends with Meeks before I went to City. Like we got into the England squad at the same time, so it was kind of like that's how we bonded, me and Meeks. But yeah, going to Villa was tough because we didn't do well. We got relegated, and like that was my team growing up. So to be a part of arguably their worst team,
the
Premier League era
must have
like,
been hard for you.
It's not good to talk about relegation.
Nah, it's not. It's not. But it's
part
of it.
It's horrible, isn't it?
Because growing up, that was the goal. The goal wasn't to win Premier League. The goal was to play for Aston Villa.
Yeah.
And to wear an Aston Villa kit.
Yeah.
And to play for England. They were the only two things that were realistic.
And you done it.
Yeah,
you done it.
Yeah.
But obviously, it wasn't the
wasn't as glamorous
picture.
as I see as a kid.
We've both been relegated, mate. Don't worry about it.
No, but it's just it's not that though. It's just like when you get relegated, your team. It's totally different ball game. That's your team, man. And then people are judging
it's still
you.
horrible anyway. I think it's horrible no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's needed. Like we don't want to become like MLS franchises.
Well, yeah, that's another story. But we'll talk about that later on. Bournemouth, another American owned.
Yeah. American owned.
American owned, and Man City, your ex team. Obviously, Man City come up trumps in that game, 2-1. Listen, what is going on with Man City at the moment? Well, from your eyes and your perspective, both of you play for the club. And look, we can always say it's this, is that. I looked at something that Pep said, I think it was today even. He said he had an article saying that they're missing that bond, that desire, and I kind of sympathize with him because when you're winning every year, how do you galvanize the team to go again at the start of the season, go again and go again?
Yeah.
You've won Champions League, you've won FA Cup, League Cup, everything there is to win, and then you get to this point now where I've got to try and get the buy-in from the players again because now where's the desire gone?
Players get tired, man. Like it's just
players get tired, players move, and mate, football.
It's hard, man.
Football changes.
Yeah,
like,
there's no one thing.
You're never going to stay at the top for the whole time.
You can't, and they've done something that no one's done. So
yeah, exactly.
For them to not do it.
Mate, Man City fans are buzzing.
Yeah.
So it's not a crisis down there.
Christ, it can't be. And even if it is, They've
They're
still
allowed.
achieved something that no
Yeah.
one's
And
achieved
they
in the
can
history
still
of the
come
game.
back.
Yeah, you're right.
In the
But
history
it's
of
not
football.
that easy to just stay at the top the whole time. Look at Man United now. Look at Chelsea now.
I
It
definitely don't
changes.
feel they get enough credit for
what they did.
No way,
No.
because there's like you can have money and spend money badly.
Yeah,
We've
that's true.
seen teams
Recruitment,
spend money, a lot more money, worse than say what that was spent and how they like maintain
Yeah,
that
yeah,
level
seen it
and
firsthand,
consistency. So yeah, they're definitely not. I think they're unfairly judged because it was just expected them to do what they've done. But nah, man,
It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see what they do next year, just to see what happens. Just to see if
Are they under pressure to win something, or can they have another gap here?
Every team's under pressure to do well.
100%.
I feel.
Yeah, 100%. And they should be because they're elite, man. They're top, so they should be under pressure. But it shouldn't be like life-threatening pressure, like job-threatening. It's like, well, you are recruited to win for Man City. It's not. We're not just trying to compete. We're trying to win. So.
And look. So they're back on form. The young lad O'Reilly came on.
Nico
O'Reilly came on and made a difference.
Massive difference. Massive difference.
Have you worked with him?
No, I know him.
Yeah.
I haven't worked with him. He was when I was there. He was a lot younger, so I think he's only 19, 20 now. I don't think he's old. So
he's young.
Yeah, but
Full of confidence.
Yeah,
He looks like when he's on the ball. He's just full of confidence.
and we haven't seen the super talent yet. Like he's a number 10 or midfielder.
So he's a proper 10.
Yeah, I think Pep was talking about him in pre-season
And
about
what
being a
did he play?
replacement for Rodri. Like Rodri,
What?
he can play that role as well. He can.
Wow.
Yeah, now he's a footballer.
The way he burst forward and the ball for the goal.
Oh, it's amazing.
That's the bit that's probably surprised me more because I didn't know he was like that
dynamic like that.
Yeah, because I didn't know he wasn't like that, but he's never had to show that because he's played in the academy where they've always dominated, so he's never had to make marauding runs like that. But yeah, that element of it
It's
is
funny because like obviously he played left back.
Yeah.
And he's doing that, and you're saying I've never seen him in that capacity before.
But having to do that.
Yeah. So, like, let's go back to your debut and your debut, Bridgie. Would you play that a position? And because you know what it's like when you go, you just want to play in it. It's like you want to make a debut. You fit in anywhere. Polyfiller. I always call that guy polyfiller. Yeah, you don't want to be known for being that person, but if you're gonna get a game, you're gonna make your debut. And it's not gonna be perfect, is it? So you just take any position, wouldn't you? And where did you make your debut? Or what position?
I was left wing, but I came on after 6 minutes. Went left wing.
You was
but
a
that
winger,
my
tricky
position.
winger, yeah.
Yeah, I was quick. I was all right, mate. I was quick, and it went all right, mate. It went well. I actually had a chance. It was against Liverpool, and that
was your first game.
I should have made it all square. Went clean through and skied it over the bar.
Oh.
I just never had that calmness at a young age of getting clean through and going being calm.
Okay. Unless you play for Chelsea, the Champions League quarter final.
Oh, that, yeah.
But like at that young age.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started off there and actually played number 10 that season. It might have been season after because I was in and out of the
You
team.
played number 10?
Played number
no
10.
way.
Dave Jones. He
didn't play number 10. I'm not having that.
He centre forward. No, but lie, right. I played one game in midfield. And I know it's the local paper. They went so Matt Letizia and Ginola was playing. It was like a mix and David Ginola, Matt Letizia all rolled into one.
No way!
Wow! Then it all went downhill from there.
And he doesn't remember it. I mean, he doesn't remember it. Did he clip it off? Did he clip it off?
Matt Letizia all rolled into one.
I did. Play
David
well,
Letizia.
David Letizia.
Matthew Ginola. Matthew Granola.
Granola.
That's a great nickname, sir. I never had that calmness in front of goal.
Yeah.
And I played striker against West Ham, actually.
Striker is what, mate?
I played striker.
And there was Pearce. Pearce was centre back. Oh, who else? You remember Pearcey? And, mate, I should have had 2 penalties against West Ham. But I never had that killer instinct.
Yeah.
And that's why they shoved me at the back, basically.
Sounds more like it.
My story ain't like that. My story ain't like that.
Let's
I played in all
hear
positions.
you.
I
Let's
played in
hear
all
you.
positions, but I was like
Then
looking up.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah, right. I played left back. I played left back.
left
That's
back.
the and I played up front for Everton.
Yeah.
We had
You played
no
up
striker.
front?
Yeah, we had no striker, man. So I was like, and I
I
wasn't just
remember
set up for like,
this.
I wasn't just up there for like a minute. I was up there, like we made changes. So the gaffer's gone like,
Who was the gaffer?
David Moyes.
Moyes?
Like remember we played a whole season or half a season with like Fellaini and Tim Cahill. and then one of them got injured. So we played one striker, and then he's like, if we need to change it, we're going to bring on Bainesy, and then you're going to... I was up front. I remember he was up front against Fulham. I'm trying to make channel runs and that. I'm not a target man.
How many games?
I wasn't a target man.
How many games do you play up front?
I think I played 2. I didn't start any games. No.
Didn't go 2 well.
No. I didn't start up there. When we made changes, I went up there. But no, that season I scored 10 goals, man.
Did you affect the game?
Yeah.
Did you affect the game?
You used to score a lot for Everton.
I scored goals, man.
You
I
did.
scored goals.
But how many goals did you get for Everton?
17. Oh, for over the 3 seasons, but I scored 10 in 1.
Is it?
But that's now.
What?
That's 100 mil.
10 in 1.
10 seasons. That's 100 mil.
One
right
season,
now.
you
As a
scored 10
fullback.
goals.
Goal involvements. I got a few assists.
I think you scored 10 in my career, mate.
Yeah, man, I got 10 in 1 season.
What?
Yeah, man.
That was more than me.
Osaka. There's just so much to learn, see, and do. Osaka has a population of about 2.5 million. Often, Osaka is considered the anti-capital of Japan, where Tokyo is its capital. It is the central metropolis of the Kansai region, and the largest of the Osaka, Kobe, Kyoto trio. However way you regard the city, there are many opportunities for you to discover it. Enter the city and you'll immediately get a feel of its commercial-centric vibe. To be able to tour around it better, know how the city is divided into 24 wards. There's Kita, the newer center of the city. Umeda is where the main terminal is located. You'll find the huge department stores and boutiques there, as well as theaters for entertainment. Just look for the shops clustered around the JR Osaka Station and Umeda Station. Namba is the main railway station, also surrounded with department stores and endless places for shopping. Meanwhile, Minami is the traditional commercial and cultural center of Osaka. It is further broken down into 2 wards, Chuo and Naniwa. Shinsaibashi and Hori are the fashion wards, while Dotonbori is the best place for eating and dining. Semba is where you will find the business districts of Yodoyabashi, Duojima, and Homachi, as well as the financial district of Kitahama. Tennoji is the area around the main subway stations and rail lines. The ward was named after the historical Shitennoji Temple. You'll also find the zoo and the park here, as well as the Tsutenkaku Tower. Then there's the Shinsekai, known as the amusement area in the old days. Of course, there's the Osaka Castle, one of the most visited tourist attractions in Japan. Kyobashi nearby is where you will find the Osaka Business Park. The north includes the Shin, Osaka, and Juso wards, while the east houses Osaka's suburbs. The southern suburbs of Osaka, containing various districts, which has the Sumiyoshi Taisha Grand Shrine. And finally, the Bay Area is where you'll see the gigantic facilities.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up in today's programme, President Trump says he's not joking about trying to seek a third term. In just a moment, we'll be asking, how is he going to get around the US Constitution? France's Marine Le Pen denounces her conviction for embezzlement, calling it a tactic to bar her from winning the 2027 presidential election. And 4 days on from the 7.7 magnitude earthquake which struck Myanmar and neighbouring Thailand, the death toll is revised to more than 2,700. Hello and welcome to the programme. The US President Donald Trump is saying that people are asking him to run for a third term in office. Well, President Trump is currently serving his second term as US leader, and according to the US Constitution, presidents are limited to 2 four-year terms. Well, supposing he wants to overturn the constitutional amendment that bars him from running for a third presidency, he'd need a 2/3 vote in both houses of Congress and ratification by the legislatures of 3/4 of the 50 US states. Well, President Trump says this idea of a third term isn't on the cards just yet, but there are ways of making it become possible.
Boy, I'd love that. That would be a good one. I'd like that. No, people are asking me to run, and there's a whole story about running for a third term. I don't know. I never looked into it. They do say there's a way you can do it, but I don't know about that. But I have not looked into it. I want to do a fantastic job. We have 4 years, just about, almost close to 4 years. Time is flying, but it's still close to 4 years, and we're getting a lot of credit for having done a great job in the first almost 100 days. And we have some big things we're going to be announcing over the next 2 days.
Well, this isn't the first time that President Trump has floated the idea of running for a third term. Just days after his inauguration, he jokingly said that he needed to raise a lot of money for the next presidential race.
I've raised a lot of money for the next race that I assume I can't use for myself, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't know. I think I'm not allowed to run again. I'm not sure. Am I allowed to run again, Mike? I better not get you involved in that argument.
Well, let's get some more analysis. We can speak to Mike Dubke, who is a former White House communications director under President Trump, who joins us now from Washington. Great to have you with us again, Mike, here on Al Arabiya News. We just heard the president.
Thank you.
Thanks. We heard President Trump saying that a lot of people are asking him to run for a third term. I mean, it doesn't sound like he's joking anymore. Who's asking him to run for a third term?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, I'm not the Mike he was referring to in your clip, just so you know. I think the people that are asking him are supporters, frankly, that are thrilled. You know, Donald Trump's at the highest point that he's ever been with his approval rating in the United States. Different NBC News had him at 47%. Other outlets have had him at 46%, which is higher. So I am sure that there are cheerleaders who are approving of what he's done at the border, approving of what he's done with DOGE and government efficiency, and are asking him this question. The bigger point here, though, is he also is amassing a large political operation. And part of doing that is holding out this hope that maybe he runs for a third term. I think it helps with his fundraising, and I also think it helps with his messaging that he's not a lame duck.
Yeah, we'll be talking a bit more about the sort of the constitutional aspects of all of this with another guest in just a moment. So we'll focus on the politics and the comm side of things. Before we crossed you, we heard President Trump there, being asked about this idea of perhaps running against President Obama in a future election. I mean, is that something people are talking about there in the US now?
Well, no, I think the president would like to talk about it. It was brought up. I shouldn't say no. It was brought up on a television program I was on yesterday that as a Republican, people would not want to see a third Obama term. So that battle royale between Barack Obama and Donald Trump is something that I'm sure will fascinate bookies and others who are cheerleaders on both the left and the right. But no, I don't suspect that's a reality that we'll see.
But okay, the reality of Trump running for a third term, according to Steve Bannon, is perfectly possible. He says that Trump would run again and win again in 2028. So it's not just President Trump who's saying this, is it?
No, it's not. But also, when you look at the kind of infrastructure, and we'll get into the politics of this, you know, a lot of what happens in American politics isn't just the election. It's also the legislative actions that are taken. We have a lot of television advertising, which is unusual, I think, for most of the world. Television advertising on public policy issues, on this bill or this piece of legislation. And in order to be able to fund that advertising, whether it be digital or on television or radio, you need to raise funds. Steve Bannon is an expert at raising funds to promote his point of view, as is President Trump. And part of this is, I think, you know, you've got to take some of this with a grain of salt. Is he serious? He may be. But a lot of what he needs to accomplish in the next 18 months before we have our midterm elections, while he still has control of the House and the Senate in Republican hands, there's a lot of things he wants to accomplish, and he needs a lot of money to help accomplish those.
Yeah, in terms of sort of decoding and decrypting President Trump, which is something I think a lot of journalists spend a lot of time trying to do, we got a bit of a hint from the Senate Majority Leader, Senator John Thune of South Dakota, who said he thought President Trump was probably having a bit of fun with all of this. Do you agree? This is a headline-grabbing tactic. A headline-grabbing tactic.
No, look. We've just gone through a week of this signal exchange, signal gate, whatever you want to call it. We've got tomorrow. There's going to be announcements of massive tariffs, if you believe the headlines. And in between, now we've spent 3 days or 2 days at least, 3 days, talking about a third term for President Trump. We tend to forget that the reason the American people knew of Donald Trump before he ran for office was because he took a turn as a television star. He is a master when it comes to this level of piquing interest. I don't want to call it manipulation, but he piques interest here or there and is well equipped to change the subject. So I'm in agreement with Senator Thune about this, but I also think there's a method to the madness, as I've stated, in terms of raising money in order to promote the program, the president's program, over the next 18 months.
Yeah, I think last time we spoke, we were talking about flooding the zone. So perhaps this is, an extension of that technique, and as you say, possibly a handy distraction from Signalgate. President Trump also likes infuriating his opponents, which is fair game in the political world. The Democrats looking like they're sort of in disarray at the moment. And then there's this other aspect of President Trump's character. He likes to keep people guessing, doesn't he?
Yes, he absolutely does. Look, it just doesn't seem that the Democrats are in disarray. The Democrats are in disarray. They'll admit that themselves. So I'm not being political when I say, or partisan when I say that. And part of the reason that they continue to be in disarray is there is disagreement on how to answer President Trump when he says things like this. So yes, that is a skill set, and he's masterful. He's masterful in that. He also, my experience with the president, when I was in the White House, is he asked for opinions from a whole host of people. And we've heard a lot around the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, and President Trump asking, should I fire him? Should I keep him? And people are going, oh my goodness, I think he's on thin ice. The problem is that's the way the president operates almost all the time, even with those that are close. He's always checking in to his large cadre of not advisors, but friends, family, etc. He's always checking in just to level set and see where there's a weakness. So all of this is part of his skill set, and all of this is part of his, his political skill.
One thing Mr. Trump can't argue with is time. He's 78 years old. He turns 80, I believe, in June of next year. I mean, were he to run again at the end of that third non-consecutive key point term, he'd be a very old man, I mean, pushing sort of 88. I mean, is that something that people in America think would best serve the country's interests, having a leader of that sort of age?
Well, if he could keep up the vigorous pace that he's keeping up now, I've got to say, when I talk to my friends in the media, they're all exhausted from the first 72 days of this 78-year-old's presidential term. And if he can keep up that level of activity, who knows? But you're right. Father Time does come calling for everyone. But as of right now, we have seen a energized presidency that we haven't seen, since the last Trump administration. So I would hate to speculate on that, just because he's got the energy of somebody much, much younger already.
I mean, what are people saying? Because you say you're on different talk shows in the United States, and I'm sure you're plugged into everything that's being said on the radio and the television and the newspapers. I mean, what do people make of the rhetoric? I mean, do people think this smells a little bit like authoritarianism to some people? What are people saying?
Well, I think that's exactly right. They're all over the map. Some people are saying that. Other Democrats are just scared. They haven't figured out this politician in 2016. They thought they had him figured out in 2020, and then they miscalculated in 2024, or even earlier than that. I'm just, from my experience, I think that this is that the president is having fun with this. I think we're very early in the administration. If we're talking about this in 3 years from now, when other individuals are lining up to run for the White House after this 4-year term, then I would take it seriously. I think right now he is energized. He has a lot of supporters who are excited, and he is building a war chest in order to get his programs done, as I said, before the midterm elections. So this is all part of the game. But if it upsets Democrats, I would think in his mind, all the better.
Okay, let's talk about maybe a more likely scenario than a third term by President Trump. And that's a term in which he is involved, but not the President of the United States, not the Commander-in-Chief. I mean, is he grooming up a successor? Is there a family member, perhaps, you think he's got in mind to replace him? Could he be perhaps an unofficial shadow president, perhaps someone in the background who obviously carries the title of president, because presidents of the United States do carry that title until they leave this world. What scenario do you think sounds most likely to you?
I think if there's another Republican that replaces President Trump, that you will see a shadow presidency. Most over the history of the United States, at least in modern history, presidents, when they leave office, are very quiet, circumspect on how they speak about the actions of their successors, whether they be Republican or Democrat, in their party or not. We saw over the last 4 years that President Trump did not fill that role. He sent out kind of a new path with Joe Biden in the White House. And I suspect he will continue to do that even after leaving office after his second full term. Again, whether it be a Democrat or a Republican. I think for Democrats, it's easier. They can just say, oh, that's the former president. I think with Republicans, and given the power that President Trump has within our primary and within our party, a Republican president replacing him would have to listen to that rhetoric. So it'll be different. That's for sure. You always get that with Donald Trump.
Okay, so on the one hand, we've said that it's a little bit early to perhaps be having this conversation, because we're still a long way away from 2027.
Yes.
On the other hand, we haven't even reached the 100-day mark. We're going to have a sort of the first indicator, perhaps the first referendum on how President Trump is doing. That's a judicial contest in Wisconsin. I don't know if you think that's significant or not. But in terms of sort of the overall report card on President Trump's first, 72, I think you said, days in office.
72 days.
72 days. I mean, what's the overall feeling about how he's performed?
Well, I think the overall feeling on all sides is exhaustion. But getting to the Wisconsin elections, there is a judicial race that's in the state of Wisconsin. There's also 2 congressional races that are happening today in Florida. I think if either one of those congressional races, to me, those are the more important ones because they should be easy Republican pickups. And if for some reason a Democrat wins one of those elections, that is going to be a speed bump, a stumbling block for the president. We should win those, and if we don't, there's a problem there. Wisconsin's a much closer race. It is a toss-up. I think at the end of the day, Wisconsin may be more of a, and we haven't brought this name up yet, but more of a referendum than on Elon Musk than on President Trump. And that's because of the amount of money that Mr. Musk has put into Wisconsin and the fact that he flew there this weekend and held rallies in Wisconsin. He's putting a lot of this burden on himself and taking away some of the negativity if Republicans lose that race, I think, away from President Trump, and he's putting it on his own shoulders. Maybe that's his intention, but ultimately, I think Wisconsin's going to be a referendum on Elon Musk, and Florida's going to be a referendum on Donald Trump.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure talking to you. Mike Dubke, former White House communications director under President Trump. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Now, the leader of France's National Rally Party, Marine Le Pen, has hit back after being convicted of embezzlement. Well, that's a conviction which bars her from running for president in 2027. Well, Le Pen says there is, quote, no way she's going to leave politics, and she's vowing to fight that ban. Well, in her first interview since the sentence was handed down, a visibly angry Le Pen told the French broadcaster TF1 that she wouldn't allow herself to be eliminated.
I am a fighter. I won't let myself be eliminated like this. I will pursue every possible avenue of recourse. There may be a small path, it may be narrow, but it exists. In fact, I will clearly request an appeal decision to allow me to consider running in the presidential election. I will always stand by the millions of French people who believe in me.
Marine Le Pen speaking there on French television. Well, let's get more. We can speak to Fabrice Leggeri, who is an MEP for France's National Rally Party, who joins us from Strasbourg. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. What's Marine Le Pen going to do now?
Well, thank you for the invitation. Now, after this verdict, the options for Marine Le Pen are first to appeal. But there is a narrow path, because the problem is that this decision made by the judge yesterday is not really, cannot be appealed, and that's a problem with the rule of law, because she cannot appeal effectively the decision to ban her on the presidential election, to prevent her from running for the presidential election. So the damage that can be inflicted by judges is a political interference. And this is also what we want to denounce, that this decision made by the court is in fact politically driven, because the judge was not neutral, and the judge said explicitly that she wanted to prevent Marine Le Pen from being a candidate and to run for the presidential election.
So you're saying the judge wasn't neutral. Just to help our audience understand, what was it about the judge and the proceedings that you think were biased against Mrs. Le Pen?
We are not talking about corruption. We are not talking about bribery. We are talking about a disagreement between the administrative service of the European Parliament on the one hand and our political party about what parliamentary assistants are allowed to do, what kind of task, whether they can support the members of the European Parliament also when they are acting in the national context as politicians. So the disagreement dated back to 15 or 20 years ago. And there are other political parties in France that are affected by this disagreement between the European Parliament and obviously French parties. So, for example, the current Prime Minister of France was subject to a similar court decision or similar, in fact, court procedure. And there is an appeal launched by the prosecutor against our current Prime Minister, Mr. Bayrou, in France. So this is also to show that this problem is not related to the personal behavior of Marine Le Pen or other colleagues. It's not corruption, it's not bribery, it's disagreement in administrative matters. And so it's disproportionate to ban Marine Le Pen and to, in fact, prevent her from being a candidate for the presidential election because of such a disagreement. So what we say is that it's a political decision, because also the prosecutor 3 months ago said that she doesn't have much against our political party. At some point she said, I don't have so much in the file, but I don't want to give up. So obviously this is a kind of judicial harassment driven by political intentions. And this is something that, unfortunately, we see in many European countries right now, that the candidates that want to express the people's voice are prevented from being candidates.
Yes, but some people who observe what's happening on the French political scene would say, look, Marine Le Pen is not an isolated case. There are people from plenty of other political parties, people like Nicolas Sarkozy, Jacques Chirac, both former presidents, François Fillon, Jérôme Cahuzac, Christine Lagarde, Alain Juppé. I mean, it's a very long list of convicted French politicians, by no means all of them, in fact, none of them, apart from Le Pen, from the National Rally Party. So some might say, there's no problem with the French judiciary, there's a problem with French politics here.
No, there is the cases you have just listed are completely different. It's not involving the European Parliament. But the problem that we have with the French judiciary is that it is not neutral. And is even more assertive in saying so that they express political views. They are also unions of judges that express political opinions. And this is a concern because normally in France, for example, civil servants, police officers, for example, they have to refrain from expressing political opinions while they are on duty. And the problem is that French people, in general, don't trust French judiciary anymore. It's also very worrying that the French judiciary is very, let's say, doesn't decide tough measures against criminals, against drugs traffickers. So if we compare the decision against Marine Le Pen to court decisions about drugs traffickers, for example, it's extremely harsh against Marine Le Pen. So that's the situation. And the problem is the French judiciary.
She's not going to face time in prison, though, is she? This is a suspended sentence, and she's very unlikely to see the inside of a prison cell. At least that's what we've been told. What are your thoughts?
Well, our thoughts are that Marine Le Pen will appeal and use the judicial means to appeal. The only thing that is really the concern right now is the ineligibility, because even if Marine Le Pen appeals, the decision about the ineligibility has to be enacted right now, and there is no possibility to appeal right now the enactment of this ineligibility. So it means that if Marine Le Pen appeals, and this is her decision to appeal, she will depend on the way the judges and the court will manage time. So it's up to it's the discretion of the judges to decide when they will plan the appeal. And the presidential election is in spring 2027. So if the judges decide that they want to process the appeal after the presidential elections or very late, then this will in practice prevent Marine Le Pen from any possibility of effective appeal, which is against the rule of law, which is against the essence of the European Convention on Human Rights. So that shows that the rule of law is a threat in France and in several European countries now. There are more and more judges who say that they can decide who will be the candidates for presidential elections.
Is Marine Le Pen likely to comply with that order to wear an electronic bracelet?
Well, the decision that was published yesterday says so, that 2 years with this electronic bracelet. But of course, this is the part of the sentence that she can appeal as well. So let's see what will be the result. So this is something that she can appeal. Yeah, and if she appeals, then there is no immediate enactment of that decision. She will not be obliged to wear this, to use the electronic bracelet right now. So if there is an appeal against that part of the decision, it is put on hold until judges have decided at the level of an appeal. But the only thing that cannot be appealed effectively right now is this ineligibility. So it's the political part.
Okay, well, let's talk about the person who's waiting in the wings, really, of the national rally in France. Jordan Bardella, still only 29 years old, but he did well in last year's parliamentary elections. He says that rallies are going to be held this weekend. Do you think those rallies will remain peaceful?
Yes, of course. We want these rallies to be peaceful. We have a great support in France. For example, during the European elections, we got between 32 and 33% of the votes. So we are political party number one in France. And of course, our message to our voters and supporters is that we should comply with the democratic rules and the rule of law, and that should be peaceful. But of course, we have to express that we are dismayed by the political decision that has just been made by the judges.
Okay, and Jordan Bardella is, however, saying that all of this could end up boosting the fortunes of the national rally. How can the party turn this around and spin this to its advantage?
I think we have to realize that there are more than 11 million of French voters who can feel today that they are despised and simply ignored by the French judiciary. Most of our voters have the feeling that the establishment, that the system wants to keep us out of politics, and that we want that the system wants to let's say shut down our political party and to in fact prevent us from speaking out, and that's something that is not healthy in the democratic system. There are also other French politicians who said that they are concerned by this court decision. The Prime Minister said that he is disturbed by this decision, that Marine Le Pen would be prevented from running for the presidential elections. Other politicians in the right-wing political parties said in France that it is not healthy for democracy when the leading candidate of the opposition is kept out of the system and prevented by a judge from running for the elections. And this is the problem is that this is disproportionate. So if we compare what are the facts and what is the sanction, this is against French democracy.
Just turning back to what Jordan Bardella said and saying how this could be used to the advantage of the National Rally. I mean, let's face it, the Le Pen brand, not just Marine, but also her father, before her, is regarded as being a toxic brand in some places, although it has been rehabilitated as a brand. But she's run for president 3 times. She's never won. I mean, isn't it time perhaps for the party to turn the page on Le Pen and give an opportunity to the next generation?
Well, for example, former President François Mitterrand, a long time ago, had to run several times. I think he won the 4th time. So he was elected in 1981. And if I remember correctly, he started being a candidate in 1965. So you see that in the French system, it's common that a candidate doesn't win for the first time. So that candidates have to run several times for the presidential elections.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, the National Rally, as you said, is the largest party, at least in terms of its parliamentary presence right now. They can make life very difficult, can't they, for the current government under Prime Minister François Bayrou. What might they do?
Well, in fact, there is a lack of stability right now because of the decision that was made by President Macron in June, July last year, when President Macron dissolved the National Assembly. In fact, he organized elections, but between the first and the second round, there was a kind of alliance between Macron's political party and the left, the socialist and the far left, and some part of right-wing political parties. And they agreed to withdraw mutually their candidates in order to avoid that Rassemblement National could win in many constituencies. So the result is that this alliance was not a political alliance to run and to rule the country. It was simply to win the elections and to keep the Rassemblement National out. But now we see the result. There is a lack of stability. There is no real majority. And of course, the Rassemblement National has a say and is very strong and powerful. So to a certain extent, this was what the French people wanted, that we have a strong voice. And we will use, of course, our strong voice. And when we don't agree with the government, we will say it and we will vote. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Really appreciate it. Fabrice Leggeri, MEP for France's National Rally Party. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Now, it has been 4 days since the 7.7 magnitude earthquake which struck Myanmar, and the death toll there has now risen to more than 2,700. That's according to the local authorities, who are also reporting that more than 440 people remain unaccounted for. Well, the earthquake, which hit around lunchtime last Friday, was the strongest to hit the Southeast Asian nation in more than a century, and it flattened numerous structures, both ancient and modern. Well, Myanmar's second largest city, the city of Mandalay, faced severe destruction, with many buildings there reduced to rubble. Well, residents in many cases are sleeping outdoors, fearing aftershocks. Many are also unable to return to their homes. Well, rescue teams say they're struggling to reach some of the affected areas because the city's streets are so narrow.
Mandalay streets are very narrow and some areas are inaccessible. Houses are too close to each other, so we have to worry about neighboring buildings. The streets are too narrow for vehicles. We have tools and equipment, but some areas require vehicle access. We fear the earthquake hasn't stopped. We feel tremors at least 5 times a day, so we need to be cautious.
Okay, well, let's get more now. We can speak to Bob Kitchen, who is the Vice President for Emergencies at the International Rescue Committee, who joins us now from Nairobi. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Let's start by talking about the latest you're hearing about the situation on the ground. We've got these conflicting reports regarding the flow of aid. There are some reports that the aid is being blocked. What's your assessment? Is aid reaching those who need it most there in Myanmar?
Thanks for having me. The good news is that the government has invited foreign aid into the country. So we are able to get to Mandalay, as you've just said, the city that's been impacted the most. The problem is that the earthquake has affected many rural areas around Mandalay, including the town of Sagin, which is contested in the war. It is very complex. We've worked there since 2008. We've worked through all of the conflict that's happened. So we're finding ways to deliver using and working with local organizational partners, but it is not straightforward.
Yeah, and surely made even more complicated and even more dangerous by these continuing, ongoing aftershocks. How's that affecting the aid distribution effort?
Well, it's clear that we're dealing with an emergency that has been layered on top of a crisis where there was an ongoing conflict, and now we've got a major earthquake. Aftershocks are common. We've faced them in Indonesia and most recently in northern Syria and Turkey. It's terrifying, and we just have to find ways to safely work through the aftershocks to reach those most urgently in need of help.
Yeah, you mentioned the ongoing conflict there in Myanmar. According to reports, there are about 3.5 million internally displaced people in the country, many of them in the worst affected areas as well. So clearly, areas that would have been struggling before this earthquake struck will be in an even more complex and challenging situation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. 2/3 of the country is either contested or under the control of armed opposition groups. So it's a very complicated country to work, and that's just been turbocharged by this earthquake.
I mean, the last time Myanmar saw a crisis of this scale, I mean, do correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Cyclone Nargis in 2008. 100,000 people were killed then. And at the time, there were reports that the junta had been blocking international aid. I mean, they said it was out of fear of foreign influence at the time. I mean, are we seeing any comparable situation there?
Well, I'll say that the IRC was first admitted into Myanmar in 2008 to respond to that cyclone. We had very brave teams rowing themselves around the country in canoes to deliver mobile health clinics. And that's being replicated now as our teams are driving and then walking into areas to deliver emergency healthcare as best we possibly can. So far, we're able to get into the big city of Mandalay, and we're being as creative and negotiating as much as we can to get to everywhere else.
And we understand that Moscow and Beijing have sent medical teams and equipment. Are the Russians and the Chinese the most visible of all of the support teams on the ground, the rescue teams on the ground? Who's on the ground there in Myanmar helping?
Well, we've got search and rescue teams from Russia, from China, and from India. And I would say international macro level politics aside, it's very appreciated at a time where the US government is basically just absent, where we're normally reliant on airlifts and search and rescue teams from the US government. They're just not there. So at a time where thousands of lives are on the line, I don't really care what nationality the search and rescue teams are. I don't really care where the commodities are coming from, as long as they're there and helping people.
I mean, it's a country of 50 million people, which is a large population. I mean, we forget how big Myanmar is. Just tell us what sort of stocks of essentials, you know, food, medicine, shelter, aid organizations would have typically on the ground at any one time in a place like Myanmar.
Well, I can speak to the IRC. We did have a warehouse full of stocks. It is a drop in the ocean compared to what is needed now. The reason why the international community, the IRC amongst them, doesn't have bigger stocks is because there's just so much unmet need on an ongoing basis. There are people around the country who are urgently in need of humanitarian assistance. before this earthquake, and now we're just dealing with a massive factor on top of that.
Yeah, and with, as well as the dead, there are obviously more than 4,000 people, we're told, who are injured. What sort of medical care, what sort of medical facilities are available to them?
Well, Mandalay is a pretty developed city, so there are hospitals and clinics. They are now very, very busy. We're especially concerned of the rural communities that have been reliant on poorly stocked, poorly resourced, and poorly functioning clinics prior to the earthquake. So any people who are trying to receive care for broken bones or other injuries are going to really struggle, and that's why we are deploying teams out there as mobile medical teams who can set bones and help people with simple interventions that can really make a difference to try and help hospitals not be overrun.
And, we gave an updated death toll in Myanmar at the beginning of this bulletin in our headlines, but it seems to be changing all the time, heading upwards, unfortunately. I'm just wondering whether that suggests that perhaps the full scale of the devastation isn't yet known, because, as we've been saying, some areas are cut off, aren't they?
Well, I would say that this is very normal. We have statistical modeling to help us understand what we're actually dealing with, the scale over time, based on the initial numbers. And this initial number of what was approaching 1,000, now approaching 2,000 dead, suggests many more people have lost their lives as search and rescue, and then debris clearance continues. We will see that number grow. Behind that number is people who have lost their homes and people who have lost major assets and access to their jobs because of the destruction that's happened. The ripple effect out from Friday afternoon will be very serious and long-lasting.
We've only talked about Myanmar up until this point, but of course Thailand was affected as well, wasn't it? I'm just wondering what the scale of the devastation there is, and presumably being a more developed country, they've got more developed facilities, have they?
Well, they're a more developed country that isn't handling a conflict, so their civil defense, protection forces are very experienced, highly capable. They have an advanced civil society themselves. So the damage, lives were lost in Bangkok and other cities. The damage was significant, but it's nowhere compared to Myanmar. So while we do have programs and a presence in Bangkok and Thailand, we're focusing all of our attention in Myanmar just because of the vulnerability of the country and the population.
And just lastly, we've been talking about, and you mentioned it just again there, the challenge of distributing aid and carrying out search and rescue operations during a war. It's a war that broke out in 2021. The UN is calling for a 2-week-long ceasefire to allow aid to reach the victims. Any chance do you think that call is going to be heeded?
The first thing I'll say is that if there were ever a time where a ceasefire makes sense for everyone, it's right now. Neither side of the conflict benefits when the civilians are suffering across the board. Everybody needs to focus on looking after the population that they're tussling with to get control of. The likelihood of it, we'll have to see. I'm better at digging holes than I am predicting the outcomes of conflicts.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Bob Kitchen at the International Rescue Committee, thank you for your time today.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Hello and welcome to this special interview. I'm Joanne Surya. My guest today is an Olympic swimmer, UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador, and someone whose extraordinary journey from war-torn Syria to the global stage has inspired millions. So much so, her story became the subject of a powerful Netflix movie. She recently returned to Syria for the first time in a decade, and today she's with us to reflect on that emotional homecoming and the legacy she's building. Yusra Mardini, thank you and welcome to Al Arabiya.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. First, I want to start with your recent return to Syria. It was your first time back in 10 years. Describe what it felt like when you first arrived.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it was very emotional for me. I was in complete denial. It felt like I was dreaming. The point where I crossed the Lebanese borders and I was like in Syria, like I was on my way and I was like, I saw "Welcome to Syria." I immediately started crying, and it was more emotional that my mom was sitting next to me, and it was also her first time in 10 years. So I felt very, very grateful and lucky to be able to go back.
Okay. And you did share powerful footage of the destruction, even where your family's home once stood. What was more difficult, leaving that first time at the start of the war, or going back now and seeing all the destruction?
I think there are two completely different experiences. Also, I'm in a different age in my life. When I left, I was 17 years old, and now I'm 27. So I learned a lot in the past 10 years, and I grew up a lot. And for me, when I left, I was a child. I didn't understand what's going on, politics, nothing. I just knew that I had to run. I had to save my life. And now I went back intentionally to my country to be able to help, to be able to rebuild the country. So both leaving was something that was very, very sad, but returning doesn't have to be, right? So yeah, there are two completely different experiences, and I reflect on both of them.
I want to go back to when you were leaving Syria the first time. Can you describe the days leading up to the day you actually left?
Yeah, it was honestly years. It wasn't just like specific days, but I shared another video on social media where I showed the place where the missile hit in the pool. And for me, this was insane for me to see again. But that was the day that me and my sister decided, okay, we need to risk our lives maybe one more time and live and have dignity the rest of our lives, because that day there was a missile that hit the pool. There was a bomb attack that happened on the football field where someone died, unfortunately, and then the hotel where athletes lived in also was bombed. It felt like a scene from a movie. We got in the car with my mom, and like the missiles were hitting like behind, and I would turn and I would see the glass, like I would see from the glass of the car that like the missiles are hitting, and to me I cannot acknowledge that still in my brain, to be honest. And then my sister and I think we were young and naive and brave enough to say, hey, we can do this. Like we can take this trip. And we weren't the only ones. Millions of refugees did that.
And you were saying you were young and naive. If that had happened 10 years later, now at this age, what would you do? What would you have done differently?
I'd be way more terrified. I would 100% trust myself and my sister to do it again. And I feel like my father raised us to be fighters. My mom taught us that education is very important. So we were raised by tough parents, and we were taught not to give up. And I think, I don't know what the outcome of the journey would have been, but I know that I would have fought until the last breath.
And going back to your recent visit, being away for 10 years, I'm sure there's so much that you missed. What were some of the things that you did, some places that you went to see, any people that you went to see that you haven't seen in 10 years?
It was very overwhelming for me, because the reason why I went back, it was a mission with UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, and Syria's refugee crisis or displacement crisis is the #1 in the world. It's really sad. It's 30 million people were displaced within and outside of Syria. 7 million still are displaced, and 81% go back to their destroyed homes, including myself. So for me, I have a plan B, right? I have a home in Germany. I established a new life, but other people don't. So it is my duty and my responsibility to go back as a Goodwill ambassador. And we went to multiple cities in Syria. We met with families. We saw projects that UNHCR are running on the ground. It was incredibly helpful for me to see that even in the destruction, I met a young girl that came, and her smile was bigger than all of us combined, right? And I was like, for these children, I want to do my best. And then I also saw my grandma. After 10 years, I saw my friends. I saw the pool. For me, the pool is more home than home. And for me, just to be able to sit and just like listen to the quietness and just the birds, as cheesy as that sounds, it gave me so much peace. But I'm not gonna also make it sound like it was only positive, because when I came back now, I've been struggling for like a few days, like with traumas resurfacing. How can I help my people? How can I move forward? I also saw the destruction to the point where I'm like, how can we recover from this? But I have so much hope that we will, and I have so much hope that people like me, UNHCR, so many organizations will rebuild the country.
We'll talk about your humanitarian work in just a bit, but still on your Syria trip, you mentioned your grandma. You didn't see her for 10 years.
Yep.
How was that reunion?
It was amazing. So my mother did not tell anyone that we're going back, and I told her maybe we should tell grandma. And then she was like, no, I want to surprise her. So I think she was in a shock. It took her a while to really fully believe that we were there, and it was she's definitely older, so it was amazing that we got to see her, and the look on my mother's face, seeing her mother after 10 years, was definitely priceless.
Yeah, of course. Another big part of your story is the pool. You mentioned that earlier, and also it was probably one of the most dramatic scenes in the film and in your life, in real life. So the missile landed in the water while you were in the water, and you're saying that pool is where your journey began as a swimmer. Describe how it felt being back where it all started for you.
Yeah, it is really emotional, because a lot of people ask about this specific missile scene, and this happened every day. It happened in the pool, it happened in my school, it happened on the streets, it happened where I live. I would see people protesting, and then someone would get shot, and then they would carry the body and protest again. So for me, it's just, it was really important to share what was happening with millions of Syrians. It was never about me telling my own story only. Me and my sister understood the responsibility of this is the story of millions of refugees around the world, not just Syrians as well. So when the missile hit the pool, in reality, I was training, and everyone ran outside of the pool, and we all went to the changing rooms, and then we took our stuff, and then we went to the gym, because the gym had a downstairs room where we all stayed. We waited for our parents to come. And then I still remember when I got to the car, to my mom, she was shouting, because she was like, are you okay? And because I was in a shock, I couldn't answer. Because when I was walking outside of the pool, it wasn't only one missile, it was multiple attacks. Why? Because every sports complex in Syria was a military base. So we were targeted all the time. Not athletes, but there was so many things that were going on that we didn't understand. So when I got to the car, before like 2 minutes of getting to the car, there was an explosion in the hotel. So all the glass flew, and I was like in a shock. I got to the car, my mom was like literally shouting, and I was like, so this is something that happened every day, unfortunately.
Yeah. And looking back at that, if there was never a civil war, and you never experienced all that trauma and that experience, how different would your life be now?
Oh my gosh, yeah, this is a very interesting question, but I don't think I can answer that one, to be honest, because it happened, and I learned from it, and I'm grateful for it. And if I stayed in Syria, I would have still had the same dream of going to the Olympic Games. I would have fought for it every day, but I don't think I would have learned as much as I learned now.
Mm-hmm.
I would have not been able to understand that I have a bigger role in life than just sport. And I am definitely deeply grateful for every step of the way, for meeting the refugees that I'm meeting, for being able to tell not just my story, but the stories of millions of refugees around the world. So, you know, I believe there's a universal plan for me, and I'm happy that I get to learn about who I am and what can I do in the world, and that I can do better and I can help people.
You mentioned your visit to Syria was actually part of a UN mission.
Yeah.
You've done incredible humanitarian work since becoming the youngest UNHCR ambassador in Goodwill ambassador in 2017. What has that experience over the years meant for you, especially now after having returned, to help rebuild your country and help your own people?
Yeah, to me, UNHCR and everyone that works in it are silent heroes because you don't get to see everything they're doing on the ground. But I was very surprised in a positive way with everything that they're doing in Syria because it is a very difficult country in the way of like the sanctions. How can we help with the sanctions? You know, still there are very, very heavy sanctions on Syria right now. And UNHCR is doing everything in their power on the ground to tell people that like 370 people, as example, 370,000 people went back to Syria right now, as example. But they went back to their destroyed homes. And they don't have access to food. They don't have access to clean water, to medical attention. They don't have the basic human rights. And UNHCR is there to make sure that these refugees or these returnee families are, you know, taken care of. And when I went to like a few of like the community centers and I saw the kids and I saw what they were doing, I also had like a circle where I talked to women because they come in for therapy, as example. And one of the women told me my dream is like to continue my education so I can come back and be a therapist in the community center. And to me, this is incredible because you're learning how to, they're teaching refugees how to give back already, you know, with the very little that they have. So for me, the work that I do with UNHCR and being an advocate is the most important job in my life because I understand how important this is and I understand how important my voice is. Because if a girl saw me in the camp or saw me in Syria now and she was 6 years old and said, Yusra could, so can I. That's everything I want in life.
And you did meet one of those girls. You posted her video on Instagram, the one in the peacoat.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that encounter.
It makes me both happy and sad. Her home is destroyed. As you can see in the video, like there are literally holes in the walls, and then like they live in the second floor. So one thing that really concerned me is that like when they're looking out of the window, they're kids, and let's say like she's this tall and then the wall is like this tall. So this is already a concern. There is no safety. The windows are like still being built right now because like UNHCR is supporting them. So for me, I was so sad walking in, and then she came in and she was wearing her Eid clothes. And I was like, what are you wearing? And then she was like, this is my Eid outfit. And I was like, this is life. This is what I learned from refugees, that no matter how dark these times are, there's always light. There's always positivity, and this is my story. When there was no hope for me, there was sport, and there was something that's keeping me going. And now what keeps me going is people like Khulud. Because she came in, she gave me the biggest smile, you know, until the moment I left. We had a conversation. She came and told me, your nails are pretty. And she like asked me questions about my life. I talked to her and her brother and sister. So in general, these are the stories and these are the people that give me motivation to do the work that I do. And I hope that I can go back and help her and help all the young children, you know, whether they're orphans or not. I hope I can give back.
And I think that's the thing about kids, right? They're so innocent and they don't really know what's really happening.
Yeah.
So something so little as a coat or your nail colors just made, you know, caught their attention, made them happy.
Absolutely,
yeah. So in addition to your work with the UN, you actually, just over a year ago, you launched your own Yusra Mardini Foundation. Tell us more about that and why it's important to you to support refugees of all backgrounds, not just Syrians, because that is part of the mission, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So after participating with the Refugee Olympic team in 2016 for the first time, you know, the team happened for the first time. So it was something very new. I was like, I don't know if I want to be called a refugee, I'm going home. So for me, I didn't understand the magnitude of everything going on. I didn't understand what could this team mean. So when I decided to be a part of the team and I went to the Olympics, I realized that we gave hope to the whole wide world. And I was like, oh, wait, hold on. This is not only about me anymore. This is about the kids in the camps. This is about the mothers. This is about the teachers, the architect. This is about me spreading a message of hope and this team spreading a message of hope. So I started receiving messages from young athletes, from grandmas, from people. And then when the swimmers was released, I told my team it's time. I was like, it's time to launch this foundation. And then they were like, are we ready? And I was like, we need to launch the foundation. It is time. So when we launched the foundation, we decided to, I co-founded with my coach, the one that trained me for the Olympics, and we work together on it, and I have incredible support from UNHCR as well. So the projects that we focus on is giving access to education and sports to refugees worldwide, because my father advocated for sports in my life and my mom advocated for education, and both are so powerful. And I want to give them the opportunity to dream. I want to give them the opportunity to be able to say, I want to become a doctor. I'm like, okay, how can we do it? How can we help you? So we started with sports projects. We started with a few projects on Lesbos, as example. I also returned after 9 years last year, and I swam in the ocean where it all happened, but for a good cause. It's called Swim for Good. And you swim as a relay with refugees, volunteers, whoever wants to do it. And the distance is 10 to 12 kilometers to honor the journey that refugees go through to arrive to safety. And many don't. So that was really important for me. And then there are projects that we did in France. There's a resettlement project we're working on with the International Olympic Committee and a university in Canada where athletes get to study and work towards getting an asylum in Canada. So it is all very new. I'm learning step by step, but I think it's the best thing I've ever done.
And how do you hope to expand that foundation?
I hope to expand that foundation specifically this year in helping my country. As I mentioned earlier, it is still the biggest displacement crisis in the world, and I think there's a lot of work to be done. And for me, my dream for this year is to be able to build schools, to be able to build hospitals, to be able to help my people heal and understand that we can all work together towards a better future. But that's basically what I want for this year. In general, my dream is to be able to help every refugee around the world, even if it sounds crazy.
You can do as much as you can, I think, and it makes a difference for, even if it's one person, it makes a huge difference. So from everything that you've seen, everything that you've experienced, and we can't not mention that incredible journey that you took from Syria to Turkey and then swimming in the sea to make it to Greece. Do you think people actually understand what it means to be a refugee without having experienced it?
It depends. It depends on the person you are. It has nothing to do with a country. It has nothing to do with where you're from. I think the education about who is a refugee, why are they refugees, where are they coming from, there's a lack around the world. I think we need to educate our children who are refugees, why do they leave their homes. So many Syrian refugees are already returning home, right? And the reason they left is because they lost their homes. They lost their parents. It wasn't safe enough for them. They were thinking about their future. So for me, it's really important to educate people about what a refugee is. I did not turn into a swimmer when I arrived in Germany, right? I had the dream since I was in Syria. I was a swimmer. The doctors that left Syria, forcibly because of the conflict, because of everything that happened, they arrived in Germany and continued doing what they love, which is, being a doctor. So for me, it's I never judge. And I never want to judge someone that's judging refugees. I want to be someone that can explain that to them and say, hey, let's have a conversation. You love our food, right? Like, you love Syrian food, you love Lebanese food, you love Middle Eastern cuisine, so give us a chance as well, right? When I got to Germany, it wasn't easy for me neither. I was like, it's cold, I don't know if I love the language, but slowly when I gave it a chance, I realized that Germany is an incredible place, and it hosted me, and I call it my second home now, right? So I think it's about being open-minded and learning who refugees are and why they leave their country.
And how much do you think social media plays a role in explaining this, this idea of refugees and what it actually means?
The most powerful tool right now, in my opinion. I think social media can, everything that like our generation or even the younger generation is seeing on social media is incredible. It's a tool of journalism, in my opinion. It's a way of bringing the truth out, and it's a way where you can educate yourself about a lot of things, but also it can be very misleading. Sometimes I saw stories about myself. I was like, wow, who is she? Like, I don't, that's not my story. So you have to be very, very careful who you're following, who are you getting your information from. But in my opinion, social media is a very powerful tool. Look at the video I just posted about my home. And I posted it because I understood the magnitude of why I need to do that. And because a lot of people can't, and I can. And my voice is heard, so I had to.
And you also showed another side of Syria, driving through the streets, the people. Tell us more about that part of Syria that's still, alive and moving.
It's a beautiful, beautiful country. A lot of people have the wrong idea about Syria, and I say it's one of, the oldest countries in the world. The oldest capital is in Syria. The culture and the history is so rich. I hope people get to, educate themselves more about it. Listen, it's not perfect, and it needs a lot of help right now. And it needs, like the streets, you can tell they're very old. They need everything needs renovation. Even like when you're driving, the ways are not like they're not fixed. And but it's just like. We love it so much. We're so proud of where we come from, and leaving as a refugee even makes you miss it more, because it's also the people. When you go back, you're like seeing your grandma, her apartment is the same, you're like going to the same place, and you're like, oh, this is a new restaurant. It wasn't there when I was there. But also, like, I was passing through places in the car, and I was like, oh my God, this is the corner, and this is that, and this is that. And the driver was like, wow, you remember a lot. And I was like, I love my country. So it's a beautiful country, and it's a very rich of culture country. So for me, I really, really hope that we can come together as one nation and build it again.
Hopefully one day. Just to wrap up, just last question. Do you plan to return to Syria one day permanently, or is Germany a new home?
Syria is my home, and Germany is my new home. You can have multiple homes, I believe. And for me, I cannot tell you like what the plan is 100%, but what I know is that I have two homes. I have people that I care about in Germany. I have people that I care about in Syria. So for me, that would be a dream to go back and live in Syria, but I need to be realistic. The country needs a lot of help. More than 90% of the population needs humanitarian aid. So my role right now is thinking of people before thinking of myself. But I would love to. I would love to go back and, open a swimming academy. I would love to go back and be someone that rebuilds schools, as I mentioned, someone that is like a force for this country. But I have no idea what the future holds. But I think that's the situation of many, many Syrians, not just me. But what I can tell you is that we love our country very, very, very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Yusra. I really enjoyed that conversation. And I look forward to what else you're going to do with your foundation and the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And to my viewers and the audience, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. This was just one story of many people who have left their countries, or were forced to leave their countries to make a future for themselves, and now give back to their people. Thank you, and see you next time.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics, and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake, and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Rizkan Show for empowering conversation.
Headley, how, in your opinion, I mean, this is a very easy and difficult question at the same time. Does the return of Donald Trump affect the geopolitical landscape right now? Is Europe becoming increasingly irrelevant in the Trump 2 era?
Well, it's certainly the narrative that we're hearing coming out of the administration, and no more so in the last 24 to 48 hours when we saw J.D. Vance essentially saying that Europe needs to defend itself without the United States. So this is an administration, I think, that has lobbed a hand grenade, if you will, into the last 100 years of geopolitics, certainly the last, if you look at the Middle East specifically, 60 years of U.S. foreign policy and global foreign policy when we look at the situation between Israel and Palestine. And I think, at least from the perspective of someone who's covered energy markets for 15 years, the Middle East for 20 years, and U.S. politics, this is a total upending of the global order. And if you speak to the Arab ministers that I speak to on a regular basis, there's a great deal of fear and also anticipation, because everyone recognizes that what we've been doing for the last 6 decades hasn't been working. So this is an administration that can either make things a heck of a lot worse or potentially come up with some new ideas, because certainly we're not getting anywhere with what we've been doing.
Thank you. Bill, getting worse or new opportunities?
Well, I've always been a huge fan of Europe. You know, when Putin invaded Russia, there was this narrative in the United States that somehow Europe would not hold together, that they would become fractionalized because of the gas, and that's not what happened. And part of this was
that was the big fear.
It was absolutely
okay.
In the U.S., there was a fear that Europe wouldn't hold because Putin would choke off the gas, and then what would the Europeans do? They would have to capitulate, etc. But of course, that's not what happened. They figured out how to do the regasification. They realigned things, and the Europeans came together. Europe will never, ever be inconsequential on the world stage. And I don't care who the U.S. president is, they are going to have to deal with Europe as long as Europe feels like they have to be dealt with. So with all of the changes that are coming in the new Trump administration, I think this is a time for Europe to become even more galvanized and find a way collectively to deal with what Trump is bringing to the geopolitical stage.
And do you expect that to happen, or do you expect some forces of fragmentation as well?
No. There will always be forces that will be attempting to fragment Europe. But again, I've got great confidence, great faith in Europe, and I think they will come together and find a way to push back on things that need to be pushed back on, and to find ways to move forward on ideas that are worthwhile.
Bill, what advice do you have for European leaders in their future dealings with the new United States administration?
Yeah, don't deal from a position of weakness. Don't think you are weak. If you come into discussions with the United States thinking that you are the lesser of the two negotiators, then you will get rolled. But you, again,
you see that happening already?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to judge where Europe is now. I will just tell you my sense of things is, President Trump admires strong leadership, and if the Europeans come in a consolidated form and collectively stand up, again, to the things that need to be pushed back on, I think President Trump will admire that in a Trumpian sort of way.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
No, I can't.
Come on, Bill. Come on. Could be, we're just a few people here. Headley, what mistakes during the first Trump presidency should European leaders, in your opinion, not repeat?
Well, I think one of the things that I saw in covering the last several years has been a tendency on the part of European leaders to be these Cassandras wailing in the winds. And to your point, when President Trump sat in a room and said that NATO spending needs to be increased, and by the way, why in the world are you taking energy from Vladimir Putin? You're putting yourselves at risk. I was literally the first person to get a German, and it was Ursula von der Leyen, then Defense Minister of Germany. I was the first person to get comment on that statement coming out of that room, and essentially everybody looked shell-shocked. But guess what? A, he was right, and B, to your point, Europe got on the ball and increased their NATO spending. And everyone agrees, whether they support Donald Trump or not, that they need to continue increasing that spending. So I would say, you know, the irrelevance of Europe, whatever the Trump administration says, is perhaps a little overblown at this point because we have seen them, when forced, get their act together. So in that sense, to your point, I mean, there's still hope, there's still room. Perhaps with new leadership.
Thank you very much. So are we increasingly moving, Hadley, towards a kind of a deal-based world order? And if that's the case, is Europe fit to face this new world order?
I would say that that's in Europe's hands at this point, because we are in fact moving to that type of world order. And it's something, in covering the Middle East, for example, I've seen for many, many years now, the original rapprochement between Russia and Saudi Arabia, for example. Given their history, no one on earth would have ever imagined that they would be as close as they are today. But they looked at the economics and they said, we have got to be friends. And at least if we're not friends, we can be frenemies. And that's what they've done on a number of issues. And whether they agreed or disagreed on what was happening in Syria or elsewhere, they've found common ground where they can. And this is the advice I would give to those in Europe. Yes, stand up for your principles, remain the center of Western democracy, if you will, even if the U.S. at times feels as if they're moving away from that. But you got to work with the people that you're given. And don't shy away from making deals where you can, because it's working for Donald Trump. Right. And we've got 4 years to watch how this plays out.
Who of the European leaders, Bill, is best equipped for having discussions with a probably far more aggressive U.S. administration than we used to be?
Yeah, but before I hit that one, let me go back to that previous question, because I think it's important. Donald Trump is transactional. Everything is transactional. But Hadley's point, if you fall off your principles, if you forget why you're here, that you are the soul of democracy and representative government and the rule of law and all the things that are important to the Western world and, frankly, to the world at large, if you forget those principles, then you will live in nothing but a transactional world, and that's not good for anybody. You mentioned that I just got through teaching my class.
What is it about, actually?
So my class is on national security decision-making.
Oh.
So I have 25 students. Yep. So I put them in the White House Situation Room, and they role play. The President, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Treasury, the Director of National Intelligence, the White House Communications.
Your role?
Well, I help coach them. But what I teach them is how you make decisions on the National Security Council are the same way you make decisions on the City Council and the Student Council. You have to understand the levers of power. And the levers of power are Secretary of State, soft power, relationships, Secretary of Defense, hard power, Treasury, financial power, the Attorney General, legal power, communications, you got to be able to communicate, right? If you don't understand how to apply all of those, then you're not going to be able to get through a crisis. But the first thing I tell them is if you're sitting at the head of that table, whether you are the president, the CEO, whatever your position is, the first question you have to ask yourself is, who are we? Who are we as a nation, or who am I as a person? If you don't know who you are as a nation, if you don't understand what the principles are, and if you don't abide by those principles, then every decision you make after that will take you further and further away from those principles and probably put you in a very bad place. If you know that you are a country that believes in representative government, that believes in human rights, that believes in the rule of law, that believes in democracy, if you believe in those things, then you're going to make decisions that are principled, that are moral, legal, and ethical. If you do not pass the litmus test of moral, legal, and ethical on every decision you make, sooner or later it is not going to end well.
Who wants to be part of that class? Isn't that amazing?
It's a fun class. Great kids.
Thank you very much. There's this old saying by Henry Kissinger, if you want to call Europe, who do you call? Yeah. Who would you call these days? Same question then to you, Hadley. Who's the one you call, if you want to call? No, you first.
Yeah, I don't know. I would call the EU.
Who's?
Well, again, I don't think you can go to one leader and expect them to speak collectively until they sit in a room and they understand the implications to all of Europe. Because if you call Germany, if you call France, if you pick someplace, you're going to get a little bit of a different response than if you ask the Europeans to act as Europeans.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't even venture a guess on who you call. Those days are probably a little past us now. But collectively, I still think the power is there, and the Europeans need to use that power in an appropriate fashion to make sure they don't get into all they have to do is be, transactional. That's not going to solve anything.
Hadley, why do you think Bill didn't mention the name Ursula von der Leyen?
My personal opinion on Ms. von der Leyen, I think she's a wonderful lady, and I think she has a job that can please no one at any time. So I think that it's a very tough job to be running, and I commend her for continuing to do it. My thought process on this, if you pursue the economics, or if you pursue the policies of economic suicide, as in my opinion Europe has over the last several years, whether it regards to energy or to growth over regulation, it gives you a lot less power when you're sitting in the room. And to your point, I think when you take a step back, and we are talking about a transactional person in the White House, and to being able to project some strength with regards to Donald Trump, yes, collectively, they'll be stronger together. What we saw happen with NATO several years ago, I think that Donald Trump was the greatest thing that ever happened to NATO, because it forced them to coalesce, it forced them to send more, it forced them to do more without the United States leading the way, if you will.
So kind of a wake-up call?
Correct, and I think that that could be what's happening right now for Europe, because if you want Europe to band together, there's no better way than to tell them that they're irrelevant if they stay apart, and that's what he's saying.
There's a sentence by Jean Monnet, I think in the 50s said, or 60s, the integration of Europe is kind of reflects the crises of Europe. So that might be hold true today as well.
It's about growing your economy. If you have economic clout to throw around in the world, you are a player. And as you said, this is a guy who is a businessman. He's a real estate guy. Look what he's trying to do with the Middle East. He's not that difficult to figure out. Right. Just whatever works for him is what he's going to pursue. And we've already seen that for 4 years. And no doubt we're going to see that for 4 more. So I think it's the point where Europe has got to recognize that and figure out how they can get out of it what they need.
From your many talks with those political heavyweights, Hadley, do you think that this message has already arrived, so to speak, in the hearts and minds of European leaders?
I think there's a growing recognition that they're going to have to play a different game going forward, and use different tools with which to be heard. I mean, I think it's about giving something and taking something away. What's hard about telling someone with the biggest ego in the room, you know what, you were right about all that, but let's see how we can make a deal.
Yeah.
And Europe has a lot to make a deal with. Yeah. So I think that that's something that's on the minds of those leaders as they're sitting just next door waiting to hear Vice President Vance.
Bill, let's return to the topic of decision making, because I think that's a very important thing. With this rise of, let's say, radical uncertainty, as kind of the new normal of international politics, how can nations and also international organizations adapt their decision-making processes in as much as that important, and how can they do that?
In terms of international insurgency in particular? Well, one, when you think about the threats, in the military, we always talk about the severity of threat over the likelihood of the threat. So nuclear war is really severe, but the likelihood hopefully is pretty low, although at times it seems to be gaining. So you never want to take your eye off the ball on nuclear warfare, because the potential for things to go really bad, you have to put effort into that. But then when you go down that curve, you get to things like terrorism or insurgency, and they probably are not an existential threat, but you have to apply some resource to them. So when you think about the decision process for any country or the EU or whoever is dealing with this, is you want to make sure you are addressing the most significant threats first, and you're going to have to assume some risk. And you assume risk, oh, by the way, by having allies. If you don't have good alliances, if you don't have good alliances in Asia, if you don't have good alliances in the Middle East, if you don't have good alliances across the Atlantic, then your ability as a nation, whatever nation that might be, to deal with the threats that are out there, that are many, that are varied, is going to be greatly diminished. Build alliances, help people help themselves, and you're going to be a lot better off. So I think that the best way is to have strong alliances.
So do you see the current administration of the United States following that path?
No, I do not. I do not. And I think this is a problem, and they're going to find this out pretty quickly.
What means pretty quickly, and what happens then?
Well, there will be a crisis. It happens in every administration. it will be something unforeseen, something that none of us can take a look at now and say, oh, I saw that coming. Invariably, there's something that is out there that it's not the black swan, it's just we're not paying attention to it, and then it happens, and you can handle it a couple different ways, but you better handle it with allies. It's the old Churchill saying, the only thing worse than fighting a war with allies is fighting without them. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. So there will be something that will test the United States. It will probably test Europe. And when that happens, if we do not have a strong alliance, if the NATO alliance has been diminished, if we don't confront the Article 5 requirements, if we don't confront the threats that we know by partnering we can handle, we may not come out on the winning end of it.
You said that happens to every administration.
Yeah.
Is there an example in your political career where that happens exactly the same way?
Sure. So
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so when I was at the University of Texas, I went there as an undergraduate. And in 1975, Vietnam fell, Saigon fell. And I was in school between 73 and 77. And I was going to be a Navy SEAL. I was, I wanted to join the military to be part of the warrior class. And in 1975, Vietnam was over, and it was disaster as the United States left Vietnam. And we had a Marine colonel who had been in Vietnam, was part of our ROTC instructor cadre. And those of us that were going to be warriors lamented the fact that we weren't going to have an opportunity to go to war. And he said, well, then, son, you haven't been paying attention. He said, every 10 years, the United States finds itself in a conflict. Well, it wasn't 10 years. About every 5 years, in my 37 years in the military, there was something. There was Bosnia, there was Kosovo, there was Panama, there was Grenada, there was Iraq I, Iraq II, Afghanistan. I mean, on and on and on and on.
Maybe the audience also should know that you were directing the operation, the Osama bin Laden operation, right?
I did, yeah. But so there is always something on the horizon, and a lot of times you don't see it coming. But as a nation, you better be prepared for the unforeseen, and you have to be organized. You have to understand the levers of power. You have to understand how to make decisions, and you better have alliances.
Leigh, given the forecasted economic downturn here in Germany for 2025, how might this impact the country's role, in your opinion, in global security affairs?
It's very difficult. I don't think anyone should deny that. I think you have to have economic security in order to project strength.
Yeah,
What's that?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think that's undeniable. I think, and you have to choose your leaders with that in mind. I have interviewed Olaf Scholz on a number of occasions, actually, and I never understand why he sits back down with me because I tend to beat him up. Last year at this Munich Security Conference last year, I asked him, how does it feel to be, running the sick man of Europe? And he denied that you were the sick man of Europe, and we all know that that is not the case, sadly. But this is a great country. This is a country with enormous possibility. As you can get that energy situation under control, which you are doing as we speak, things can be turned around. But again, to the bigger point, you have to have that economic clout to project strength. But just as an aside, while we're all sitting here in Munich, we're thinking about the future of the world as we know it, Western democracy, what's going to happen with Ukraine and Russia, what's going to happen in Gaza, and numerous other things, including AI and China. The President of the United States is planning to go to Miami to the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia's conference. It's their investor day in the United States. The biggest money guys in the United States and in the West are going to be there. They're going to be sitting in front of the president. And that was his choice. He was there to talk to those guys and not to us. And I think, that's totally fair. But if we're talking about allies, if we're talking about friends, I think it's deeply important to recognize what the U.S. administration sees as valuable.
Did you speak to Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor, at this Munich Security Conference?
Sadly, no.
As well?
I can't imagine why he doesn't want to talk to me again.
What would be the question? If you had a single question to him.
I think, for me, obviously, I've covered politics, I've covered energy. I was the last person, as you say, to talk to Vladimir Putin. Was it worth it? Because in those last days before the invasion, the narrative coming out of Germany was one of, we want peace, we want peace. We can't envisage any situation where we would have another world war, et cetera, another conflict. Was it worth it to stay on the back foot, to not be aggressive? because as you remember, the dance was so delicate and people were so worried about the nuclear threat, et cetera. But what we've seen over the last several years is that Vladimir Putin, while his economy is growing right now, the long-term impacts of the sanctions and of his isolation and being out of the international financial system is going to do long-term damage to his country. And his mindset, clearly, it's all about what's happening now, not what's happening in the future. So would Germany have been better off doing a little bit more to project to the Russian people, to Europe as a whole, that this is a threat, that this is someone that we need to watch, that this is somewhere where we may in fact have to be the aggressor as opposed to playing just offense? I think that Europe, unfortunately, with all of its history, has been very guilty of trying to bury its head in the sand on a number of occasions, and this is one of them.
Bill, you nodded. You would have asked the same question or a different one?
Well, yeah, but I would take a little bit of a different cut on it. I mean, it is easy to kind of look back in hindsight and say what we should have done. But to Hadley's point, there was the fear of the nuclear. I mean, the nuclear threat was out there, and we didn't know whether Putin was a rational actor. I will tell you, before the invasion, I did not think he would invade. And I didn't think he would invade because I had a couple of reasons. I said, one, there will be withering economic sanctions. He will become a pariah in the international world. The Ukrainians will fight. And, oh, by the way, NATO will come together. Biden will be stronger. Well, all those were true, but he invaded anyway, right?
He didn't care.
He didn't care, right? He absolutely didn't care. And so, I think it was, I give, again, the Europeans a little bit of a pass early on because of, one, the intelligence also said, look, this war is going to be over in 3 weeks. Russians are going to come in, they'll be in Kyiv, and it'll be over before we really have an opportunity to do something. Of course, that didn't happen. And it did take a while for the Europeans and the United States, really, to kind of get their feet up under them and to begin to support Zelensky and the Ukrainians the way they needed to.
The BMW Foundation guys will beat me up if I don't ask a single question on the topic of energy. So let's use the last 3 minutes on the energy topic. Although I could listen to you guys for ages about what you're saying because it's just awesome. What role will the issues of energy prices and energy infrastructure, especially, and also what we have seen here in Ukraine, play in a future security architecture worldwide and especially here in Europe? What's your take on that?
It's enormously important, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence. We know this is going to cost a great deal of money and it's going to move very, very quickly. One of the questions I think that everyone in this room and across Germany is going to have to start answering is whether or not, you're going to have to weigh whether or not it's worth bringing nuclear online once again, for example, simply because of the enormity of the cost and weighing those environmental concerns as well. But I would take a step back and also think about places where you can win. For example, as much as energy is important in the coming race of artificial intelligence, for example, you've got to also remember there's a sweet spot, and I'm talking about semiconductors. If you can find ways in which you can benefit from the opportunities that the next 10 years are going to bring, and even in the short term, like the United Arab Emirates is doing, Arab Emirates, like Saudi Arabia is doing, they've decided, okay, we can do a sweet spot where we can be a hub, for example, for semiconductors. There are ways to make this work to your advantage, but it does require a great deal of movement on the part of the government and also on the part of politicians being honest with citizens about the trade-offs. Yes, we want a green planet, but unfortunately, we also want to be able to power our phones. So, honest conversations with people about what that actually takes is something that everybody, I think, across Europe is guilty of not having had with their citizens, and I think they need to do that now.
Bill? Yeah, and I would just, I agree with everything Hadley said, but I would also say we have to be realistic about when peak oil is going to be. Yep. The fact of the matter is we're going to need fossil fuels for a very, very long time. As much as we would like the energy transition to move quicker, it isn't. Now, again, I'm a big nuclear guy because having spent my time in the United States Navy, we have 18-year-old kids running nuclear power plants and doing a fine job of it, right? We've got to figure out a way to modularize these power plants, reduce the cost, put them into practice and into action so that, again, we can begin to power the AI generation with the fabs that are coming online, with all the power that's going to be required to run hopefully the quantum computing. All of that will be important. But we also have to figure out a way, do we use more LNG rather than crude oil? How are we going to balance fossil fuels? Because they're going to be around for a long time. And we're going to have to build these things in parallel. The energy transition, recognizing that we're still going to need fossil fuels, and find a way to live harmoniously with both of those until the fossil fuel curve can begin to drop off.
No doubt about it. And I think one of the most important stats when we talk about artificial intelligence, when we talk about powering this AI boom, for example, I don't know if you all are aware, but China spends more on the import of semiconductors than they do on iron ore imports and oil, crude oil imports combined every year. And I say this just to sort of another wrench in the game, which is who makes all those semiconductors other than the United States? Taiwan. So if you want access to that, instead of having to grow your own semiconductor industry, which you're 10 years behind on, Taiwan is sitting right there. So I think that we need to start making those correlations between the energy that we're going to need globally and where we're going to find it.
Thank you for putting things in perspective, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for a dynamic and excellent conversation. Bill McRaven, Hadley Gamble. Thank you.
Thank you.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture. The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics, and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake, and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern,